Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to give you a coding exercise using do-while loop so you see how practical this do-while loop is. So we are going to write a program that checks to see if you're entering your password correctly or not. As long as you're not entering your password correctly, it is going to ask you enter the password again and again and until it is correct. So when you enter the correct password, it finishes the program. So initially we initialize two strings, one password and one corrected password. So imagine that the correct password is ABC, something very easy. And we start our loop here, do, so it enters the loop without checking any conditions. It says enter the password and you enter your password. It says if the password is correct, it does not enter this condition because this condition says that password does not equal the correct password. So if the entered password, the one that you enter, is not equal to the correct password that is ABC, it says enter incorrect password, try again. And it says as long as the entered password does not equal the correct password, ask this again from the user. And if by chance you mention that, okay, enter the password and you enter the password and the password equals correct password, it does not print, it does not enter this if, it escapes. And here the condition does not pass because the password equals the correct password, so it does not have to go another time in the loop and it says access granted. So let's try and see. So if I say ABC, it says access granted. So here is my password. Here is the correct password, ABC. Enter the password. I say ABC. So ABC, it says that password does not equal correct password, but this is not our case because the entered password and the correct password are the same. So it escapes this loop. Then it checks to see as long as password does not equal the correct password. So this is not also our case because they are equal. Therefore, it finishes the loop and it gives us the access. However, let's try once more. And it says like enter the password. I would say something like this. It says incorrect password. Try again. I would say anything. Try again. Try again. And whatever you enter, it says try again. And in the end, I mentioned the correct password and it says, okay, access granted. So you see, this is very useful example and this is a very practical example. In the real world, we have some access like that in the world when we want to check something like emails, etc. Of course, there is a limit until like you can repeat it for 2 times, 3 times. After that, your account will be blocked for security reasons. However, we can use the do while to do that. So here it says enter the password. I say QWE. It says they are not equal. Therefore, it enters this if and prints incorrect password. And because they are not equal, like the entered password and the correct password are not equal, it goes to the loop once more. It says enter the password and it stores. And I said TRTY, they're not equal. It says incorrect password, try again. So it is what it is printed here. And then because they're not equal, it goes again to the loop. So this continues until I give the correct password in the end, and it says access granted. Welcome back to our course. So the first lecture is on the data types, and as I would like this course to be very practical and hands-on learning and practicing coding, etc., I right away start diving into the coding environment so we can easily test everything here together. So basically, this is the environment that I'm using here, but it's not important. what environment you're using. Whatever you're using, either it's online or it is installed on your desktop, Mac, or whatever. The important thing is that you just keep trying and you just keep making mistakes and try and start doing it. It may in the beginning look like, okay, this is too easy in the beginning. I don't even need to try it, but believe me, you need to try and you need to start coding. So, in the beginning, when we have like as you see here, everything is commented. But how things are commented in C++? If we want to comment something, for example, now I would like to make some changes. As you see here, we see the red part here, meaning that we did some modification, but we haven't registered it yet. And the modification that I just made was just pushing the tab button a bit so the line would start from the, not from the start, but a bit further. So here we want to write something like author is Reza Shahin. So as you see, this is unknown type name for the programming language, and it returns immediately, it returns error. In order to keep some comments, we can just put two slashes here, so it is now commented. I can have this one here, like the author, the date, uh, the, I don't know, this code is the first version, for example. All these information can be commented, and then you start your code as of line 20, for example. So when I push Control S, everything is saved, and you see the green light here saying that, okay, this is now registered. So this is the first type of commenting in the code. And the second type is in C++, we can have slash star and then star slash in the end. And whatever that are between slash star and star slash are commented. As you see here, for example, for data types, it is commented, so it doesn't have any problem for the code and the compiler. Let's start from the line 1. This is the default include that we consider for the C++, and we include this one for considering a string in our code. But just by default, consider these two these two including parts. Later on the course, I would discuss different including things that we can consider and why they are important. But this is not the point of our lecture today. So these two includes are now working. The rest are commented as there are two slashes behind them. Typical C++ programming would have like a few lines for including lines and then one int main function. So when we open the int main function, the first lesson is the data types. So data types, we want to start it. As you see here, we put some information in commented, but the things that we would like to discuss in today are also commented. So I remove the slash. You see here, now we defined one integer value named a that is said to have the value 1. But we have one warning. It says that you declared one integer value and you have not used it yet. It's okay, but we are going to use it later. But it is just sending us some warning to consider. So the first data type is the integer. When we want to declare an integer value, one of the ways is to define it as int I, int, and all of them should be lowercase, equals to 1, and then we have a semicolon there. So we can also have like int, when we used in a one time, we cannot say another time a. For example, I cannot reassign a. It says that redefinition of a, so there is an error. I would say a1. So a1 is 2 now. So we declare two integer variables. The first data type that we need to learn is the integer. And then we have the type float. that is for numbers that are having decimal values. So we define the float b with the value say 3.14, and we need to be careful about the semicolon in the end. Whatever we write in our C++ programming, it must end with a semicolon in a line. So it still gives us some warning saying that it is unused. Again, it's not a problem. We're going to use it. So there are two ways to define numbers that are having decimal values. The first one was float, and the second one was double. So we can also declare double when we are having a number with decimal values. And there are some, small differences between float and double that we will discuss later on in the course. However, if you want to just have a clue of the general differences, is that when we declare a number with the float type, it uses usually 4 bytes of memory, and when we declare it as a double, it uses 8 bytes of memory. So what's the difference? So it consumes the memory more. So if we are going to use a number that is larger than a certain amount, it is recommended to use double, so it gets more memory usage. But if we are going to simply use a number with decimal values that are not so much large, we can simply just declare them as a float. But how large, how small they should be to choose between float or double, this we will discuss in the comparison that we will make in the upcoming lectures. But for the moment, that is enough for you to know that there are two types, float and double, that you can declare either of them, but there are some differences in terms of the memory usage. And also double can represent a wider range of values compared to float, because because of its higher precision and larger memory size. So this is the only thing that we need to know for the moment about it. And then we have characters that we can define, like character. It is with the name char, char, and this is char name. It could be whatever. It could be like my character equals. It should be. You should really be careful about the quotations here. Like whatever you want to put there, you can put, for example, my name, Reza. It's okay, but it should be between these two quotations. If we forget about one quotation, we will have error. If we forget about two quotations, we will have error. So it must be between two quotations, and of course with a semicolon in the end. And the last one that we would like to discuss is a Boolean type. We declared an ABC named Boolean that could be whatever, like my bool, we could declare equals true. So for the Boolean, there are only two values that can be assigned, either true or false, and that's it. It's either 0 or 1. When it's true, it represents the value 1, and when it's false, it represents the value uh, when it's false, it represents the value 0. For the float number, it's the same. We can declare all the numbers with decimal values, and for the integer, it's only integer values. Sorry, for example, we cannot have an integer declaration for a and then consider having it with decimal values. It gives us some warning saying that you need to use double or maybe float for this and not the type integer. So these are the basics data types that we needed to know in the beginning. Then we learned about how to put comments. You see here now our code, we push the Control S and our code is registered. and these parts are comments. So whatever we put there, like whatever we type there, it's considered as nothing, as it is not even existed. So this is the first way of putting comments, and then we have the second way of putting comments like this between slash star star slash. And finally, we learned about different data types that we declared here. In the next lecture, we dive into more details about the data types. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this course. So in previous lecture, we learned how to declare some different data types, like as you see here, integer, float, double, characters, and booleans. In today's lecture, in today's lesson, we would like to print their values. So we declare an integer a1, for example, equals to 2. And we would like to print this integer value and see it in the terminal. Here, we prepared something for you. As you remember, everything is commented here in between. Everything is commented. So I uncomment this line. Oh, sorry, I put it more comments. So I commented this line. I uncommented this line. I declare integer a equals 1 semicolon, and it ends. So this is the declaration that we have here. And remember that we had some commented libraries and including things here. So one of them is using namespace std. So let me explain what this std is all about. So here, now I uncomment this line and we will have probably some errors if we want to run it. So if we would like to print something, we would have to write std colon colon, then cout, means that show us the output. Then we would have these two signs, and then between quotations we would be able to have the comments that we would like to be printed in the terminal. For example, we write it here, the value of a is, and one space is put here, so, and then we close the quotation. Then we mention a, so the value of the integer that we wrote will be printed, and then we put and l. Before and l, I would write std colon colon and l. So this is how we can print it. So let's try this one to see how the result would be. I run and wait for the compiler to run my code. Oh, here is the result. The value of a is 1. So what was the message that we typed here? So the value of a is, and then instead of this part that we put a, you see the value 1 is printed. So now that we know the value of putting the value of this integer being printed, we would like to mention that using namespace is very good. So now, if what happens if I remove this std? If I remove this std and run again the problem, we will see that we have an error. It says undeclared identifier, and also this one. If I remove them and compile, we will have two errors. So std is very important to be written every time, but because every time we need to write it down, it is not very convenient. Instead, we could use this using namespace std in the beginning of our program, and forget about it. throughout the program. So now that I uncommented that this using namespace std semicolon, we run the program again. Okay, this time we don't have any errors, and voila, it is printed. So if we are considering putting using namespace std semicolon in the beginning of our program, we can escape using it throughout the program. But if we don't mention it in the above, we need to type it every time that we are writing. So this is the first point. The second point is that the syntax for printing is cout. So when we use cout, we are sending the machine that we want to print. And the end L, let me just remove this end L so you will see how the result would be different. In this case, because we have only one printing, the result would not change, you see? Okay, so you see the press return to close this window came to the line 1. Previously, it was in the line 2. So let me print something else. Let me print it again. Let me just copy paste this line one more time. So now what happens is this. So you see the value of A is 1, the value of
Hello,
A is 1,
welcome
press
back.
return true. So
In this
everything
lecture, we
is
are going to
printed in
discuss
one line only.
how do we do the
When we
operations
have
in C++. Previously,
instead, when
we
we have
learned
the
how to
end
declare
line,
data types,
we will
and
see
we
that
learned how
it
to print
goes
them
to the
in the
next
terminal.
line.
So now in this lesson, we're going
So
to do
when
some
we have the end
mathematical
L,
operations with
we
the
have the value
declared
of
data
A
types.
is 1, then
Goes
so
to the
let's
next line,
and the value of
let's
A
dive into
is
it.
1.
We declare
Again,
two integer
press
values.
return. So if I
Variables.
also put
The first one
end
is
L
int a equals
in
31,
here,
and the second one is
I will
b
see
equals 15. So previously we learned that
we
if we
have
want
3
to
lines now.
declare
We
an
should have 3
integer
lines. Okay, you
or
see
any
here,
other types
so
of
the value of
data
A is 1,
types,
the value of A is 1, and then press
can
return to
simply
close this
assign
window.
a value to
So
them.
this shows the
However,
value
in this lesson, we're
of
going to
using
learn
end
that we
L
can
in the
do
end of
some
the line.
mathematical
So this
operations
lesson
for
was
the
all
assignment
about
of
the
data
cout.
types. For example,
So we
we have
printed the integer
C
A1.
assigned
So
to
what
be
about the
the
next one?
A
So the
plus
next
B. So
one
instead
is
of
a float
putting the
type.
value
So
of
again, if we
like
want to print it,
46,
we type cout.
we can simply
We
let the
can
system,
type a
let the
message,
machine,
or
and the
we can
computer
even
do the
type nothing. But because we
do
want
the
our
math
program to
part,
be
and then
clear,
assign it to
it
the
would be better to
integer C.
type some message.
And
For
also,
example,
if
the
you see
value
here,
of
while I was commenting
B
this line, the
is
77 line,
and
we
then
had
we
two
put B
warnings
here,
for
and L,
75 and
we
76, these
control
two
S
lines. We had a
register
warning
and
saying
we
that, okay, you
compile.
declare these two variables, integer variables, these two, but you're not using them.
Yes.
So why it is
So we see the
returning
value
some warning?
of B
The
is
reason that it returns some
3.14.
warning is
So
that
easily
we are
we print this one.
using some
Again, for the
we are
double, the same
using
thing.
some
We can
memory of the
easily
computer by
practice this,
declaring a
like
new variable.
C
And if we
out.
are not going to use it,
The
the
value of
system,
C
the
is
compiler would give us some
and
warning saying that,
C
okay, you
and
declared this
L.
one and you're not using
We
it. So
also
you
have
may want to
the
consider removing it to
characters and
release some memory.
booleans.
In this
So I
level of
would write
programming,
them
it may not
together
be
like this.
very
So the value of
necessary to keep track of your
char
memory.
name
However, as we proceed
is,
through the
then I put
coding and
the
as we
char
advance in
name here,
programming, it is very
and
important to
L.
manage the memory very well so we
Also, we
can
can write the
increase the
value
speed
of
of the
my
program or
boolean is,
avoid having some
then we put
memory
my
leak
boolean.
something like this.
Just you should
So
be
for the
very
moment,
careful
it's not
with
important.
the
However, now
uppercase
that
letter
I
and lowercase
uncomment the
letter in
line
C++ because
77,
it
we
is
will see the
sensitive. So
warning
if
for
I'm
these two
writing an
lines are
uppercase M
disappeared. The
here, I
reason
should
is
have
that we're
the
using them. We declared
uppercase
something
M
A
here
and
again.
B, and
So
we are
let's check
using
to
them
see
in
if we
the
have
line
errors or
77.
not.
However,
we're not using integer
So we don't have any
C.
errors.
That is why we still have a warning for this
Okay,
line.
great.
So let's
these are
print
the
out
print.
this.
So we
This
printed
line.
2A,
We
1B.
learned that
You
if we
see
are
that
using
the B is between quotations because
namespace
here I
std
put
in
the
the beginning of
quotations
our
in the
code,
printing part. If I
we
remove
don't
it, it
need
will
to
be removed.
write
Then
std
the
comma
C,
comma
then
cout
the
every time.
char name.
So here, when
Is
I have
A
that
because we put
declared
the
in
value
the
as the
beginning
input
of the
A,
code, I
and
just
then the
write
value of my
cout,
boolean
then I
equals
write
1.
whatever
Why
the
1?
message I
We
would like
set
the
true.
value
So
of A
as we
is,
mentioned earlier, for the
then I
boolean,
put
we
the
either have true
A
or false.
here
So the
and
true
hit
equals
L
1
and we
and the
run.
false
We will
equals
see that
0.
it
So
now
whenever the
needs to show us the
print
value
value
of
is
A.
1, just know that it is
Now it's
true. Whenever it is
compiling, we
0,
didn't have any error,
just
so we see
assume
that the
as
value of A
false.
is printed.
So
So
this is
let's
how
go for the next
we
two lines. The
print
value of B and
our
the value of C
values.
is also printed
This is for
with these
how we
comments.
print our
Let's
values,
try.
and then in the
We
next
have no
lecture we are
errors. It's
going to
compiling.
discuss
Okay.
about the
So
operations
the value of
using
A is
these
printed like
data
31.
types.
The value of B is printed like 15.
Stay tuned.
The value of C is also printed as 46. So the key
Hello,
point to
welcome back.
today's lecture
In this
was
lecture,
that
we are going to
the math is done
discuss
by the machine. We
how
don't need
do
to
we
do the
do the
calculation.
operations in
We
C++.
just assigned
Previously,
the
we
A
learned
plus
how
B
to
to C,
declare
and
data
it
types,
did the calculation
and we
itself, and
learned
now it's
how
printing it.
to print
So
them
now
in
that
the
we
terminal.
see that we have this
So now in
option,
this lesson, we're
we
going to
can
do some
uncomment
mathematical
these
operations
parts
with
as
the
well.
declared data
Like
types.
we declare
So
D,
let's
E, F, and G
let's dive
to
into
be
it.
A minus
We
B
declare two
assigned
integer
to B,
values,
A times B
variables.
assigned to E,
The first one
A
is
divided
int
by
A
B
equals
assigned to F,
31, and the
A
second one
modulo
is
B,
B
which gives us,
equals
which
15.
returns us the value
So
of the
previously we learned that if we
remainder
want to
of
declare
when
an
A is
integer
divided
or any other
by
types
B.
of data
So
types,
here you see we used
can simply
integer C, so
assign
the
a
warning
value to
for
them.
this line is
However, in
disappeared
this
now.
lesson,
So we still have
we're
the
going to
warning for
learn
the
that
rest
because
because
we
we
are
are
not
not
using them anymore,
mathematical
using them
operations for the assignment
yet,
of data
let's
types.
say.
For example,
So
we
let's
have
print
integer
out
these
C
values
assigned
to
to
be the
it
A
would
plus
work.
B.
So instead of putting the value
Now
of
compiling, no errors.
like 46, we can simply let the system, let the machine,
let
and the
me
computer
bring
do
it down here so we can
assignment,
compare it
do
with the
the math
operations.
part,
Okay,
and
now
then
it's good.
assign it to the
So
integer C.
A
And also,
minus
if
B
you
is
see here,
printed to in
while
D
I was
and stored
commenting
in D.
this
So
line,
it's
the
16,
77
which
line,
is their difference.
we had two
So
warnings
A times
for
B is
75 and 76.
465.
These two
That
lines.
is
We had
stored
a warning saying
in
that okay,
E.
you
We
declared
can see it
these
in
two
this line.
variables.
Then we
integer
have the
variables,
F
these two,
as to be 2.
but you're
So
not
when
using
A
them.
is
So
divided
why
by
it
B,
is
the
returning
value
some
would
warning?
be 2.
The reason that it
And the
returns some warning
remainder
is that
is
we
1
are
because when A
using
is divided
some
by 2
by
B,
we are
which is
using
15,
some memory
the
of the
remainder
computer by declaring a
would be
new
1.
variable.
If we change the
And if we
value
are not
from
going to use
31,
it,
for
the
example, to
system,
30,
the compiler
we
would
would
give
see
us
that
some
the
warning
remainder
saying that
should
okay, you
change.
declared this one and you're not using it. So you may
Compiling,
want to consider removing it
no
to release
error.
some memory.
Let's see the result.
In this level of
Yes.
programming, it may
So
not
still
be
we see that
very
A divided
very
by B stored
necessary
in
to
F, it is still showing
keep track of your
number
memory.
2, which
However,
is
as we
correct.
proceed through
However,
the
when
coding
we
and as
change
we
31
advance
to
in
30, we
programming,
have
it
no
is very
remainder
important to manage the memory very
because
well so we
these
can
are
increase the speed
so
of the
30
program
is
or
15 times 2, so no
avoid
remainder
having
is
some
rest
memory
will
leak
be there
problem
when we divide
problem
A
something like
by
this.
B.
So for the moment, it's not
So in
important.
today's
However,
lesson, we
now that
learned
I
that the
uncomment
operations can be
the
done
line
by the
77, we will
machine,
see the warning for
and
these
we
two lines are
tested
disappeared. The
some
reason is that we are using them. We
some
declared something A and B, and we
beginners
are using them in the
operations,
line 77.
mathematical
However,
operations,
we are not
and
using
let the machine
integer
do the
C.
mathematical
That is why we
formulation.
still have
In
a
the
warning
next
for this
lecture,
line. We are going
so
to
let's
do the
print
same
out this
mathematical operations,
this
but
line.
to the
We
float
learned that if we are using
data variables.
namespace std in the beginning of our code, We don't
Hello
need
again,
to write
welcome back.
std
Today we are going
c
to
out every
discuss
time.
about the
So
operations, the
here,
second part
when I
about the
have
floats.
that
In
declared
the previous
in
lecture, we
the beginning of the
discussed
code,
how we do
I
the
just write
operations for
c
the
out,
integers.
then I write
And
whatever
in
the
today's
message I would
lecture, we are
like the
going
value of
to
a
do the
is,
same operations
and
with
then
floats.
I put the
So we declare
a here
different
and,
floats here as
l,
A,
and we
B,
run.
and then
We will
as of
see that
C, we
it
have the
now
operations
needs to show
involved
us
in
the
value of
assignment.
A. So C equals A
Now
plus
it's
B, D equals
compiling.
A
We didn't
minus
have any
B,
error, so we see that the value
E
of a
equals
is printed.
A times B, and
So
F
let's
equals
go
A
for the
divided
next
by
two
B.
lines, the value of b
So
and the
there
value
is
of
one
c
thing
is
to
also
be
printed
very careful
with these
about when
commands.
we are
Let's
doing
try.
these
We have
mathematical
no errors.
operations
It's
for the
compiling.
float. So all of
Okay,
these
so
operations
the
are
value of a is
possible to
printed
be
like
declared and
31, the
assigned
value
for
of
a
b is
float,
printed
but
like 15.
the value of
For
C is also
the
printed
module,
as 46. So
it's not
the
working.
key point
So
to
this
today's
is
lecture was that
some
the math
limitation of
is
C++
done by the
that
machine. We
does
don't
not
need to do the
allow to
calculation.
use the modulo
We just
operation
assigned
for
the A plus B to
float
C,
value.
and
It
so we
did
need to
the
be careful
calculation
about it
itself,
in
and
case
now
you're
it's
seeing
printing it.
So now that we
This
see
error
that
in
we have
your
this option,
compiler,
can
you need to be
uncomment
careful. You
these
need to
parts
think,
as
oh,
well.
okay, this is not
Like
possible
we
for the float.
declare,
So
it says
D,
that it
E,
invalid
F, and G
to be A
to
minus
binary
B
expression float
assigned
and
to
float.
D,
So it's
A
not possible
times
to
B
do
assigned to
the
E, A divided by B
module
assigned to F, and A
operations for
modulo
the
B.
float,
However,
which returns
are
us the value of
easy
the
to do. It's
remainder
exactly like
of
the
when a is
integer
divided
data type. So
by b.
here
So
we
here
compile.
you see we used
So we
integer
see no
c, so the
errors.
warning for this line is disappeared
So the
now.
error is
So we
gone when
still
we
have the
commented
warning for
everything
the
about
rest
the
because
module.
we are not using them anymore. We're not
So
using
it
them
does
yet, let's
print
say.
the value of A
So
in D,
let's
the
print
value
out
of B,
these values to see
and then
how
C as the
it would
A
work.
plus B, and then D,
Now
E,
compiling, no
and F.
errors.
So this lecture is very similar to the previous one. This is
let
only
me
to
bring it
keep
down
noted
here
that
so we can
we cannot
compare it
use
with the
module
operations.
for
Okay,
the
now it's good.
float variables.
A minus b is printed to in D
Hello
and
everyone,
stored in D.
welcome back.
So it's 16
In today's lesson,
which is
we
their
are going
difference.
to talk about
So
library
a times
functions.
b is
So for the
465
library
that is
functions,
stored
there are a
in
few
E.
things that we
You can
need
see
to
it in this
know
line.
before we dive into
Then
the
we
lessons.
have the f
So there
has to
are
be
some
2.
already
So when
defined
a is
functions
divided by
and
b, the
libraries
value
in C++
would be 2.
that can help us
And
to
the
do
remainder is
some
1 because when a
mathematical
is divided
operations.
by
And
2
there are
by
some
b, which is
reserved
15,
strings,
the
and
remainder
let's say
would be 1.
strings
If we change
for
the value from
performing
31, for
these
example, to 30,
mathematical
we would
operations.
see that the remainder should
So
change.
when we mention that there are some
Compiling,
reserved strings for these
no
things,
error.
it means that
Let's see the result.
we cannot use
Yes.
these
So
reserved
still,
ones to
we see
name
that
our
the
integer, to name our
a
own
divided by b
newly
is stored
defined
in f,
string,
it is
etc.
still
But
showing number
now
2,
I will
which
give
is
you more
correct.
information, so
However,
you will get to know that.
when we
But
change
before we go
31
for
to
the
30,
library
we have no
functions,
remainder.
we go up to
Because
the code in the
these
beginning
are
of our code.
so
Here,
30 is
because I
15
want
times
to
2,
use
so
these
no remainder
libraries,
is and I want to
rested
use the
will be there when we divide A by B.
already defined library
So in
functions
today's
of C++.
lesson, we
I
learned
need to
that the
include it
operations
in
can be
the
done
C++
by the machine
and
program
we
in the beginning.
tested
So don't
some
forget to include
some
math
beginners
before we dive
operations,
into these
mathematical operations.
lessons. So
And let the
in order
machine
to
do the
proceed
mathematical
here,
formulation. In
we
the
wanna
next
show
lecture, we
some
are going to do the
some
same
already defined
mathematical
library
operations,
functions in
but
C++.
to the
So we
float
define, as before,
data
we define two
variables.
integer values like x and y. The x
Hello again,
equals
welcome back.
25 and y
Today
equals
we are
4.
going to discuss
And as
about
we
the
are not using
operations, the
them,
second part about the
they
floats.
are
In the
like
previous lecture, we discussed how
having
we do the
the warning
operations for
in the
the
code now.
integers. And in
In
today's
order to
lecture,
print
we are
them,
going to do the
we
same
use the
operations with
syntax
floats.
of cout.
So we
We
declare
know it very well
different
now.
floats here,
And
as
in the
A,
end,
B,
we put the
and
and
then as of
L
C, we have the
to make
operations
sure that it
involved in
goes
the
to the
assignment.
next line for
So
the
C
following
equals
codes.
A plus B,
But what
D
are the
equals A
reserved
minus
functions?
B,
The first one is
E
sqrt.
equals A
The
times B,
sqrt
and F
function
equals A
gives us
divided by
the
B.
a
So there is
square
one thing to
value
be very careful
of a
about
number,
when we
of
are
an
doing
integer.
these
So when we
mathematical
define
operations for the
an
float.
integer here,
So
like
all of
x
these
equals 25, and
operations
when we
are
want
possible to be declared and assigned for a
have
float,
the
but
square root of the x,
for
we can
the
simply
module,
write
it's
sqrt,
not
and
working.
within
So
brackets we
this
put the
is
number. So
some
easily it will
limitation of
print
C++
us
that it does
easily it
not
will print
allow
us
to
the
use the
square
modulo
bracket
operation
of
for
the
the
integer
float
x.
values.
So
So we need to be careful about it in case
let's
you're
compile
seeing
and see this error in your compiler. You need to be careful.
So
You need
now
to
no
think,
errors.
okay, this is not
Exactly. So
possible
the
for the
square
float. So
root of 5,
it
a
says
square
that
root of
it
5.
invalid
So what
to
we
binary
had
expression
there
float
was
and
something
float. So
like a
it's not
square root
possible
of
to do the
x is 5. So the better typing
module
would be the square root
operations
of
for the float. However, the rest of them
x,
are easy to do.
and
It's
then we
exactly like
is
the integer
the
data
rest
type.
of the
So
code.
we
So this can give us a
here we
better
compile.
output and more clear output.
So we see no errors.
So let's check it out again.
So
Let's
the
try
error
this.
is gone when we commented everything about the module.
Yeah. So the square root of
does
25 is 5. So
print
this
the
is what
value
is
of
it,
A
what
in
it is
the
now printing
value
for
of
us.
B,
So the first library
and then
function is the
C as
sqrt.
the A
The
plus
second
B,
one is
and
that when
then
we want
D,
to do
E,
some
and
mathematical
F.
formulation
So
or
this lecture
have
is
some
very similar to the
countings
previous one. This is
in our
only to keep noted
code,
that we
simply we
cannot use
can, for
module
example,
for
instead of
the float
doing the
variables.
math ourselves, like 4 times 4 equals 16,
Hello
we
everyone,
can define
welcome
4
back.
as to be an
In
integer
today's lesson,
named
we are going
y,
to talk
and the
about
power
library
and
functions.
y to the power
So
of
for the
2
library
would be like
functions,
this:
there
po
are a few things that
bracket
we need
y
to know
comma
before
2.
we dive into the
So this
lessons.
code will
So
help us
there
to
are
have the
some
result of
already
the y to the
defined
power of 2.
functions and
Why we are
libraries in
using
C++
this? Let's
that
see the
can
print
help
and
us
then
to
I will
do
explain. So it
some
says that power
mathematical
y
operations,
2
and there are
is
some
16.
reserved
So
strings
here I
in,
say
let's say,
power y.
strings
So let's
for
say y to the
performing
power of 2
these
equals 16.
mathematical
So why do
operations.
we need this
So
formula? This formula would
when
be
we
helpful when we
mention
have
that there
a
are some
lot of
reserved
computation that
strings
we
for
need to
these
do.
things, it
It's
means that
easier to
we cannot
automatic
use
everything
these
in the code rather
reserved
than
ones
dive
to
into the
name
details.
our integer,
So
to
it's
name our
easier
own
to
newly
let the
defined string,
machine
etc.
do the
But
formulate, do the
now I will give you
math
more
part for you,
information
and
so
just
you will get to
you
know that.
use the
But
formulation.
before
So
we go
you can
for the
easily
library functions,
make sure
we
that
go
everything
up
is
to the
handled
code in the
correctly
beginning
and
of our
very well.
code. Here,
So the next
because
one
I
is
want to
that we
use
define
these
a new
libraries,
integer
and I
value,
want to use the
integer variable. We call it val, and the number
already
that is assigned
defined
to it is
library
minus
functions
5.
of C++. I need to
Then, in
include
order
it
to
in
have the
the
absolute
C++
value of x, we
program in
simply
the
can
beginning.
use
So
this
don't
formula
forget to include
abs.
CMAP
Within the bracket, we
before
put the
we
name of
dive
the
into these lesson.
integer
So
variable that we defined.
in order to
So let's
proceed
compile and see
here,
what the result would be.
we
wanna show some
we have
already
no
defined
errors. It's
library
compiling.
functions in C++. So we
Okay, now
define
the
as
absolute
before, we
value
define
is
two
5.
integer values.
You see,
Like
here
x and
we
y.
assigned
The
minus
x
5 and the absolute
equals
value is 5
25,
and y
so
equals
it
4.
is giving us
And
the
as we are not
absolute value.
using
It's a
them,
very straightforward
they are like
library function that we can use in our code
having the
while we're doing
warning
the
in the code
formulations.
now.
So the next one, in order to print
Is
them,
we
define
we
a double
use the
called
syntax
num,
of
and we
cout.
assign the number
We know it very well
4.3.
now.
And in the end, we
So
put
in
the
order
end
to
l
have
to
the
make
rounding
sure
up
that
the
it
number
goes
to
the
the
next
next line
integer,
for the following codes.
the
But
nearest
what are the
integer to it,
reserved
like
functions? The
rounding
first
up
one is
to the nearest
sqrt.
integer.
The
Would be
sqrt
using the
function
ceil
gives us
cell
the
function. So we
a
say
square
cell
value
within the
of
bracket
a
num. It will
of a
give us
number
the
of an integer.
output
So
of when we
5. So
define
the output
an
of 5
integer
is
here,
expected to
like
be seen
x
here.
equals
Let's
25, and when
try
we want to have the
and see
square
what would
root of the
happen.
x, we can simply write sqrt, and
Yes.
within
So
brackets
here
we put
we
the
see
number.
that the
So
ceiling
easily it will
value
print
is
us
5.
So the
Easily
value,
it will
the
print us
original
the
number
square
was
bracket
4.3,
of
but the
the
ceiling
integer
value
x
so
is
let's
5. It is rounding up to the
let's
nearest
compile and see.
integer.
Again, we can do this for like the other way. The other way
So
around
now
would
no
be to
errors.
round down a
Exactly. So
number.
the square
So to
root of
round down
5,
a
a square
number, we
root of
define
5.
another double
So
called
what
num2, and we
we
assign
had
the
there
value
was something like a
4.7,
square
and
root of,
instead
we use
x
the
is
floor
5. So the
function. So
better
instead we would use the
typing would
floor
be the
function,
square
and
root
this
of
time
we are
uh,
expecting to see the
x,
output as to be 4.
and then we put is
Now compiling,
the
no
rest of the code.
errors.
So
Yes, the
this can
floor
give us a
value
better
equals 4.
output and more clear
Let's check it
output.
out again
So
here.
let's check it
Sorry.
out again.
Let's check it out
Let's
again
try
here.
this.
Yeah, so the original number was
Yeah.
4.7 and
So
the
the
printed
square
number
root
is
of
4. So
25
it
is
rounded
5. So
down
this is
the
what it is now
double
printing
number.
for us.
So the first library function is the
So
sqrt.
another
The second one
function
is
that
that
would be
when we
very
want
helpful for
to
us in C++
do some
would be the
mathematical
following. So if we
formulation
have
or
two
have some
numbers and we want
countings
to make
in
sure
our
what the
code,
result
simply we can,
what
for
the
example,
larger
instead of
number is
doing
among
the
these two.
math
So
ourselves, like
it's
4 times
sometimes you
4
might say that
equals
okay, so
16,
if we know two
we can
numbers like
define
2 and
4 as
7,
to be an
we already
integer
know
named
that the
y,
larger
and
number
the
is 7.
power
Yes, this
and
is a straightforward.
y to the
However,
power of
in
2
the
would
day-to-day
be like this:
coding,
po bracket
you
y
may
comma
define two
2.
integer
So this
values in the
code will
beginning
help
of
us
your
to have
code,
the
like
result
let's
of the
say
y
let's
to the
call them
power of
x
2.
and y.
Why we
Then
are
you do a
using
lot
this?
of
Let's see the
computation
print
on
and then
these
I will
two
explain.
values.
So
And
it
since the
says that
machine is
power
handling all the
y
computation,
2
you don't know
is
that x
16.
would be larger
So
or y
here I
would be
say
larger
power
after
y.
like
So let's say
100
y to
lines
the
of code
power of 2
being done for the
equals 16.
calculation.
So why
And
do we
in the
need
end,
this
you
formula?
just
This
care
formula would be
about the
helpful when we
larger
have a
number. So
lot of
instead of,
computation that
reading
we
all
need to
those
do. It's
lines and
easier
going
to
through the details,
automatic
etc.,
everything in the
you
code
can
rather than
simply
diving
use
into
this
the
library
details.
function. So in
So
the
it's
end, you
easier
can simply
to
just
let the
find
machine do
fmax,
the
the
formula, do the
integer
math
value
part
for
for you,
the
and
first
just
integer
you
value, and
use the
comma the
formulation,
second
so
integer
you can
value like here,
easily
and then it will just give
make
you
sure that everything
the
is
largest
handled
value. So
correctly and very well.
here we use
So the
fmax,
next
and
one
there
is
are two
that we
values,
define a
3.7,
new integer
3.5 and
value,
7.2, and obviously the
integer
larger
variable. We
is
call it val,
7.2, so you
and the
can
number that is assigned to it is -5.
easily get
Then, in
the
order to
larger
have the
number
absolute
here. So
value
this is
of
the
x,
maximum
we simply
7.2.
can use
As
this
I mentioned, it
formula
may be straightforward,
abs.
but when you
Within the bracket, we put the
automate
name of the
everything in the code,
uh,
in
integer
tens of
variable that we
lines of code,
defined. So
in the
let's
end, you
compile and
don't need
see
to go
what
through
the
the
result
details. You
would be.
just simply use this function, and it will return
We
you
have
the
no
larger number.
errors. It's compiling. Okay, now the
Hello
absolute
everyone,
value
welcome
is
back to
5.
this course.
You
In
see,
today's video, we're
here
going to
we
talk
assign
about how to
-5 and the
read
absolute
data
value
from the
is 5.
terminal. So
So it
previously,
is giving
we
us the
used to work
absolute
with
value.
like
It's a
this,
very
like
straightforward
we would say int
library function that we
a
can use in our
equals
code
10,
while we're doing the
and then
formulations.
we
So
learned
the
how
next one
to
is we
print it.
define
So
a
the
double
value of
called
a
num and we
is
assign the number 4.3.
a
And
handle.
so in
So
order to
previously we
have
learned about
the
this, so we
rounding
compile.
up a number to an integer, the nearest integer to it, like
So
rounding up
compiling, no
to the
error.
nearest
So here we
integer
see that it
would be
printed our
using the
data.
cell
So what if we
cell
want to read the
function. So we
data
say
actually
cell within
from
the
the
bracket
terminal?
num. It will
So
give
if
us
we want to
the
do that, if we
output
want to
of
read
5.
the
So the
value
output of
a
5 is
from the
expected to be
terminal,
seen
we
here.
should
Let's
change
try
our approach somehow. So we can change our
and see
approach
what
like
would
this.
happen.
We just define our
Yes,
integer
so
data type,
here
like
we see
called
that
a,
the
and then
ceiling
we
value
learn
is 5.
here
So the
a new
value, the
syntax
original
that
number
is
was
cin,
4.3, but the
and
ceiling value
then
is
we
5. It
see
is
in
rounding up to
the
the
a
nearest
that we have here.
integer. Again,
But
we
in
can do
order
this
to read
for
it
like the other way. The other way around would be
from
to
the
round
user,
down a
we need to
number.
first
So to
show a
round down a
cout
number, we define another double called
message
num2
to
and we
the
assign the
reader
value
saying that, for example,
4.7,
whatever
and
you want,
instead
you can say
we
that
use the floor function.
tell
So instead
me
we would
what
use the floor
your
function, and this
number
time
is,
we are expecting to see the output as
and
to be
then
4.
we close it. Then we
Now
store the
compiling,
number
no
that the
errors.
user tell
Yes, the
us.
floor
We store
value
it here, and then we
equals
show it
4.
here. Let's try this
Let's check it out again
program
here.
together to
Sorry.
see if it works or
Let's check
not.
it out again here. Yeah, so the original number was 4.7 and the printed number
yeah,
is
it
4.
says
So
that tell me
it
what
rounded
your
down
number
the
is. So I would say
double number.
10, and it
So
returns me the
another
value saying
function
that
that
the
would be very
value
helpful
a
for us
is
in
10.
C++ would be the
So
following.
here we
So if
declare
we
the
have
integer,
two numbers
then
and we want to make sure
send a
what
message
the
through the
result
terminal to
of
the user
what the
saying that,
larger number
okay, tell
is
me what your
among
number is.
these two.
And whatever
So
the
it's
user
sometimes
enters
you might
here,
say
it
that,
will be
okay, so if
stored
we
in
know
the
two
A
numbers like 2 and
using
7,
the
we already
cin
know that the larger
syntax.
number
And
is 7.
then here
Yes, this
again
is a
with the
straightforward.
cout
However, in
syntax,
the day-to-day
we
coding,
show
you
what
may
the
need to
stored
you
and
may
entered
define two integer
integer value
values
was.
in the
So
beginning of your
let's
code, like
have
let's
some more
say let's
examples
call
here.
them x
So
and y.
here again, I
Then you do
define
a lot of
another int.
computation
So
on
let me
these two
comment
values.
the
And
above
since the
line
machine is
so it's
handling all the
clear.
computation, you don't
So
know
we
that
have an
x would
integer
be larger
value
or
called
y would be
number.
larger after like
We show the
100 lines of code
print
being
value to the
done for the
terminal,
calculation.
enter an
And in the
integer,
end,
and we
you
read
just care
the
about the
number,
larger
and
number.
then
So instead of,
we show the
reading
number.
all those
So it's again the
lines
same
and going
procedure.
through the
We
details,
first
etc., you can
declare the
simply use
integer,
this library
we
function.
show the
So in the
message,
end, you can simply
and
just
then we
find
store the number
fmax,
that is
the
entered by the
integer
user, and
value
then we
for the
show the
first integer
output.
value and
So here
comma the
again we
second integer
compile.
value like here, and then it will just give you
Let's see how it would work.
the largest value. So
So
here we
enter
use
an integer.
fmax
I would
and
say
there are two
14 this
values,
time.
3.7,
It says
3.5 and
you entered
7.2, and
integer
obviously the
14.
larger is
So it stores it
7.2,
here.
so you
So
can
the application of this
easily
is very
get the
widely known.
larger
For
number
example,
here. So this is the
if you want
maximum
to enter
7.2.
your
As I
panel through
mentioned,
a
it may be
website or
straightforward, but when you
where you have
automate
registered
everything in
already,
the
so
code,
you
like
enter
in
your
tens of lines of code,
for
in
example,
the end,
username
you
for the
don't need to
first
go
time
through the
and the
details. You just
password for
simply
the
use
first
this
time.
function
So
and it
these
will
two
return you the larger
are
number.
stored in the database of the website
Hello
using if they're
everyone,
using
welcome back
C++,
to this
for
course. In
example.
today's
One
video,
option
we're
could
going
be
to
using
talk about
cin.
how to
So they
read
store it in
data
their
from the
database,
terminal.
and
So
the next time
previously,
that you
we used to
want
work with
to visit
like
the
this,
website or
like we
wherever
would
that
say int
registration is,
a
you enter
equals
everything and
10,
they check
and
your
then we
entered data
learned
with
how
their
to
already stored database,
print it.
and
So the
if
value
it's
of
there they say
a
okay, you
is
can come in. There are some if
a,
conditions to check before
and
they let you in that we'll
so
discuss
previously
later
we
on this
learned
course.
about this. So we
So this
compile.
is how integer is done. Then if we want to consider a character, so let me
Compiling, no
comment the
error.
ones
So
that were
here we see that it
integers here.
printed
So we
our
have a
data.
clear
So
code.
what if we want to read the data
So
actually
let's say
from the
I have a
terminal? So
character
if we want to
defined that
do
is
that,
char,
if we want
and
to
the name
read
is
the
character.
value
So
a
that is
from
char.
the
You can
terminal,
call it
we should
whatever you want
change
instead of
our
that. I
approach
can say
somehow. So we
my
can change our approach like
my
this.
char, for example.
We
I
just
would say this.
define
So whatever
our
you want, it's
integer
your call.
data type, like
So
column A,
then
and then we
we
learn
show the
here a
message
new
to the user
syntax
saying
that
that
is
enter a
cin.
character, and then using
And
cin
then
function,
we see in
we
the A that we
restore
have
it.
here.
And now here we have a
But
an
in
error
order to
because we
read
changed
it
the name of the different
from
character.
the
I would say my
from
char.
the user,
So and
we
then
need to
here we
first
should
do a
have another
cout
error because we need to change the character here.
message to the
So
reader
here what
saying
I'm
that, for
doing is
example,
that
whatever you
I am
want, you can
declaring a
say that
character. Then
tell
I'm
me
showing
what
again I'm going
your
through the procedure. I'm
number
showing a
is,
message to the user saying that okay, enter your character.
and then we
Then
close
we
it.
store the character
Then
using
we
cin
store
function and
the
we print it
number
out.
that the
Okay.
user tell us.
So for a
We store it here,
character,
and
we
then we
know
show
that
it
we
here.
need
Let's
to
try
store only
this
one letter.
program together to
So
see if
let's
it works or
compile.
not.
We're compiling. Let's check it out. So
I would say R,
and it
yeah,
returns
it says
me
that
my
tell me
character.
what your number is.
Let's
So
compile again.
I would say 10,
This
and
time,
it
for example, I
returns
would
me the
say A.
value
It
saying
returns
that the
me the
value
character
A
again,
is 10.
A. So
So,
here we
but
declare
what
the
if I want
integer,
to
then
put
we
two letters like
send a
RE?
message through the
It returns
terminal to the
only R.
user
saying that, okay,
what
tell
if
me what your
I
number is. And whatever
want
the
to
user enters
store
here,
more
it will
than
be stored in
one?
the A.
Like I would say
Using
Reza.
the cin
It only returns me R.
syntax.
Why?
And
The
then
reason is that
here
we
again
declare
with
it
the
as a
cout
char.
syntax,
So
char
we
only
show what
is
the
able to
stored
store
and
one
entered
letter, not
integer
more than
value
that.
was.
So
Let's
even if you
have
write
some more
many
examples here.
letters there,
So
it
here
does not
again, I
register
define
it. It
another
only
int. So
is
let me
able to
comment
register the
above
first
lines.
letter. So this is
It's
something very
clear.
important to keep
So
keep in
we
mind
have an integer
while you are
value
using the
called
characters.
number. So what if we want
We
to
show
consider
the
more than one letter?
print value
So
to the
then we
terminal,
don't need to
enter
use,
an
we don't have to
integer,
use
and we
char
read
or
the
char. We are
number,
only
and
using
then
string.
so in
We
that
show the
term,
number. Let me
so it's again
comment
the same
these
procedure.
lines.
We
So
first
everything is clear.
declare
So
the
we know
integer,
which
we show
lines
the
are
message,
currently working.
and
Let's go
then
down.
we store the number that is entered
here,
by the user, and then we
need to
show
declare
the output
string.
So here again,
when we want
compile.
to use a string, we need to
Let's see
be
how it
careful
would
to
work.
include this in the beginning of our code.
So enter an
we
integer.
did
I would
this
say
already
14
in
this
another
time.
lesson.
It says
Here,
you
string
entered
is included.
integer 14.
So no worries.
So it stores
we are
it here.
calling the
So the
libraries
application
of
of
C++
this
when we are
is
including
very widely known. For example,
we
if
declare one
you want to
string, the
enter
name is
your
word. The name
panel
could be
through a
whatever
website
you want.
or
So here I name it as
where
word.
you have registered already,
Again, the same
so
procedure.
you enter,
We show a message
your,
to the user saying that,
for example,
enter a
username
word,
for the first
and
time
then
and the
store the word
password
using
for the first time. So
function.
these two
And then we
are
simply print it.
stored in the database
So this time
of
I
the website
compile.
using, if
Let's
they're
see the
using
result.
C++, for example, one option could be using cin. So they store it in their database, and the next time that you
word, I would say
want
Reza.
to visit the website
This time,
or wherever
because
that,
we declared
registration
a string,
is, you
it
enter
returns
everything
the
and
full
they check
letters.
it's not
your
only the
entered
first letter
data
like
with
their
char.
already
So
stored
let's
database,
try again.
and if it's there, they say, okay, you can come in.
I would
There are
say
some if
whatever
conditions
you
to check
want
before
like
they let you
Amir
in that we
Hussein.
discuss later on this course.
It returns
So this
Amir
is how
Hussein.
integer
Whatever you want
is done.
Let's
Then
try
if we
again.
want to consider a character, so
say
let me comment the
here,
ones that
it
for
returns
integers here. So we have a clear code.
One
Important point
so
about the
let's say
the way
I
that
have
we
a
are reading the
character
information from
defined
the
that is
input
char,
is the following.
and the name is
So
character.
here
So
I'm defining
char,
the string.
you can call
I'm
it whatever you want.
storing
Instead
everything
of that,
using
I can say
cin function.
my
So cin function
my
cannot,
char, for example. I would
go
say this.
after one space.
So whatever you want,
What that
it's
means.
your call.
That means
So
it
then,
means that, for
we
example,
show
when
the message
when
to
we
the
were
user
having
saying that enter a
characters being
character,
stored,
only
and then
the first
using
letter
cin
could be
function,
stored.
when we are having
we
a
store it,
string
and now
being
here we have
stored,
a
using
we have an error
cin
because we changed the
function,
name of the
cin
declared
function
character.
can
I would
go
say
up to
my char.
no matter
And then here
how
we
many
should
number
have
of
another
letters you
error
have
because we
in
need
your
to
string,
change
but
the character.
there should be no space
So
between
here,
them.
what
If
I'm
there
doing
are
is that
spaces
I am
between them,
declaring a
it
character.
cannot differentiate.
Then I'm showing
again. I'm
let
going
me
through
just
the
give you an
procedure. I'm
example.
showing
So
a
here
message
we
to the
wrote
user
Reza,
saying that,
and
okay,
Reza
enter
was
your
okay.
character.
But if
then
I
we
push the
store the character
space,
using cin
and then
function,
I
and
write,
we print it
for
out.
example, my
Okay.
last name.
So for a character,
returns
we
me
know
only
that we
the
need to
first
store
part. So
only
when
one
we are
letter.
using
the cin
So let's
function
compile.
for
We're compiling.
for
Let's check it
storing
out.
the input to read and
I would
store
say
the
R.
input.
It
It
goes
returns me
until
my
the
character.
first. Let's compile
the
again.
first string, and the second one is
This
missed out
time,
because there is
for
a
example,
space
I would
there.
say A. So
It returns
but
me the
if
character
I
again.
compile
A.
again,
So
but what if
write
I
my
want to
first name and last name
put
like
two
this?
letters?
It's
Like
okay. RE.
but there is no space here.
It
Usually
returns only R.
we put a space there.
So
what
what
if
do we do?
I
This is one of the
want to
problem
store
using
more than
cin function.
one?
So let me just
Like
comment
I would
again.
say Reza.
So here
only
I'm
returns
commenting
me R.
everything.
Why?
So
the
we
reason
go
is
to
that
the
we
next
declare
lesson.
it as a char.
So here,
So
char
I am
only
is able to store
declaring
one
another
letter,
string,
not more
I
than
am
that. So
counting
even if you
just
write many
enter
letters
two
there,
words or
it
three
does
words
not
or whatever,
register it. It only
and
is
the
able
full
to
string,
register
just
the
whatever.
first
But
letter. So this is
here
something very
I'm
important
not
to
reading
keep in mind
the
while you are
input
using
as
the
before.
characters.
So before I
what
was
if we
only
want to
using
consider
cin,
more than one letter?
but here
So
I am
then
using
we don't need to use
get
we don't have to
line,
use char,
and within
or
bracket
char we are
cin
only
input.
using string.
This
So in that
helps
term,
us to
let me comment these lines
read
so
the
everything
entire
is clear,
line
so we
and
know
not only the
which
first
lines are
word.
currently
Let's
working.
try this one.
Let's go down. Yeah. So if
here
we try this one,
we need to declare string. So
let's see
when
what
we want
happens.
to use a string, we need to be
So if
careful
I
to
write
include
Reza,
this
it
in
will
the
say
beginning
Reza.
of our code.
Let's
We
compile
did
again.
this already in another lesson. Here,
String is included.
if I write Reza
so
Shahin
no
with a
so we are
space,
calling the libraries of
gives
C++
me Reza Shahin with
when we
a
are including
space.
this. So
And if
okay,
I say
we declare one string,
like
the name is
Reza
word. The name could be
Reza
whatever you want.
Shahin,
So
it
here I
gives me
name
the
it
full
as word.
line.
So this
Again,
is
the same
one of the
procedure.
important
We show
things
a
that we need to
message to the
consider
user
while
saying
reading the
that
input. Depending
enter
on what
a
we
word,
want to get
and then
from the
store
user,
the word
we
using
need to
cin function.
code based on
And
that.
then
We
initially
simply
we
print it.
showed that an
So this
integer
time I
value
compile,
can be
let's see
declared,
the result.
then a message sent to the user. We store it using cin, and then
No
we show the
error.
message.
Okay.
We can do
Enter a
this with the
word. I would say
characters, but
Reza.
only one letter
This time,
can be stored
because
in
we
characters.
declared
So
a
if
string, we are
it
aiming
returns
to
the
get
full
an information
letters. It's
from
not
the
only
user
the
that
first
is
letter
one
like
character.
char.
We use char.
So
because
let's
it
try again.
uses less memory. But if it's more than one character,
I would say
and one
whatever
letter,
you
let's
want,
say,
like
we
Amir
need to use
Hossein,
string. And
it
if we want
returns
to use
Amir
a string,
Hossein.
if the
Whatever you
string is
want.
only one
Let's
word
try again.
and no space there, so we
say
can simply
peer,
use
it
cin
returns
function
peer.
to read the data and store it.
One important
However,
point,
if there
point
are
about
multiple words
the way
and
that we are reading the
there are some
information
spaces
from the input
between them,
is the following.
we need to use
So
get
here,
line
instead of
defining a
cin
string
only,
we use the
storing
function
everything
get
using
line, and within
cin
bracket
function.
you
So
just type
cin
down
function
cin
cannot
input. This is some
go
predefined
after one
function
space.
from the
What
C++.
that means.
Then you
That
store
means
it.
it means
Thank you
that,
very much
for
for
example,
following this course.
when we were
In the next
having
characters
lesson,
being
we will
stored,
dive into
only
the
the first
deeper
letter could be stored.
deeper
When we are
understanding of C++.
having
See you there.
a string being stored using cin function,
Welcome back.
cin function
Today, we're going
can
to
go
discuss
up
if
to
conditions.
no
In the
matter
if conditions, there
how
are
many
certain
number of
things that
letters
we
you
need
have
to learn.
in
But
your
before
string,
that,
but
let's
there
review
should
what
be
we
no
have learned
space
so
between
far.
them. If there
So,
are
we
spaces
learned
between
how to
them,
declare
it cannot
an integer
differentiate it.
number. Here we're declaring
Let
an
me just
integer
give you an example.
called
So
number.
here we wrote Reza,
Then
and Reza was
we
okay.
print
But if
a
I push
cout
this space, and then I
syntax saying
write,
that
for
we
example,
use
my
cout
last name,
syntax to print
it
enter
returns
an
me
integer.
only the first part. So
Then
when we are using
learned
the
how to
cin
store this
function for
entered
for
integer
storing
by
the
user
input
using
to read
cin
and store
syntax
the
or
input,
cin function.
it
So
goes
far, we learned
until
how to
the
do this.
first
But
the
now
first
we're going
string,
to
and the
discuss the
second
if
one is
conditions.
missed out
So
because there
if
is a space there.
conditions are like this.
So, but
So
if
the
I
user,
compile
imagine the
again
user enters one number.
and write my
Here we are
first
saying
name and
that
last
if
name like
the
this, it's
number
okay.
is greater
But there is
than
no
zero,
space here. Usually
then print the
we put
number
a
is
space there.
positive.
So what do we do? This is
Else
one of
if,
the
where we are
problem
having
using
another condition.
cin function.
Else
So let me
if,
just
when
comment
we add
again.
another condition, we use
So
else if.
here
So
I'm
else
commenting
if in the
everything. So we
bracket,
go to the next lesson.
number
So here
lower
I
than
am
zero, so smaller than zero,
declaring
in
another string.
parentheses,
I am couting
cout
just
the number is
enter
negative.
two words or three words
And
or whatever,
another else that we
and the
have
full
is that
string,
if
just
the
whatever.
number is
But
neither than
here
or greater
I'm
than
not
zero,
reading
nor smaller than zero,
the
we have
input
else, the
as
final
before. So
else
before I was
that
only
says
using
that okay, the
cin,
number is zero.
but here
So
I am
generally it's
using
like
a
if the
get
number is
line
greater than zero,
and
it
within
prints
bracket
is
cin
positive.
input.
If the number
This
is lower
helps
than
us
zero,
to it prints negative.
Read the entire line
of the
and not only the first word. Let's
it
try
prints
this one.
whatever that we want. We can say the number is
if we
0,
try this
or we
one,
can say neither of the
let's see what
conditions
happens.
met. So whatever else, it says that
So if I write Reza, it will say Reza
did not meet.
Let's compile again.
This is the else if. So let's run and try with a few more examples to see what happens.
If I write Reza Shahin with a space,
so no error,
it gives me Reza Shahin with a space. And if I say,
I would say 10.
Like Reza
So the number is
Shahin,
positive
Reza
because 10 is greater than 0.
It gives me the full line. So this is the one of the important things that we need to consider while reading the input. Depending on what we want to get from the user, we need to code based on that.
If I mention
Initially, we
like
showed that an integer value can be
0,
declared, then a message sent to the user.
Conditions
we store it using cin, and then we show the message. We can do this with the characters, but only one letter can be stored in characters. So if we are aiming to get an information from the user, so what is important is to know we use char because it uses less memory.
So
but if it's more than one character,
that we have
one letter,
let's say,
then
we need to use
parentheses,
and
within
if we
which
want to use a string,
if
the condition,
the string
like
is
here,
only one word
if the
and
number
no space there,
is greater
so
equal
we
19,
can simply
then I
use
put
cin
the
function
brackets
to read the data,
have the conditions. One
and
bracket
store it
is here.
However,
and
if
another
there
one is
are
here.
multiple
If I'm
words,
going to
then
check
there are some
condition,
spaces
this time
between
we say
them.
else if.
We need to
Then
use
within the
getLine instead of
parentheses, we
cin
mention
only.
number is
We use
lower
the
than 90,
function
for
getLine,
example,
and
then we
within
have the
bracket
brackets,
you just type down cin
and then
input.
we
This
see
is
out
some
the result.
predefined
So in
function
this
from the C++.
situation, it is
then
not
you store
efficient
it.
to have else.
Thank you very
Why?
much
The
for
reason is
following this
that
course. In the next
then a number
lesson,
is either
we will
greater or
dive
equal
into
to
the
90
deeper
or
lower than 90. Deeper
So
understanding
there is
of
nothing
C++.
that
See you there.
these two wide conditions cannot meet. So this is
Welcome
why
back.
the else
Today, we're
condition
going
is
to
not
discuss
considered
if
in this
conditions.
example.
In
So
the if
if we want
conditions,
to,
there are certain things that we need to
run
learn.
this code.
But before that,
Let's review
it
what
would
we have
be
learned
something
so
like
far. So we
this.
learned how to declare an
So we
integer
get
number.
the input
Here
from the
we're
user,
declaring an integer called number.
and we compile.
Then we print a cout syntax saying that we use cout syntax to print
Now that
enter
it is
an
compiling,
integer.
okay,
Then
it asks
we
to enter
learned
one
how
integer.
to
I would
store
say
this
94.
entered integer by the user
So
using
the result
cin
is
syntax
your
or
score
cin function.
is A.
So
Let's
far,
run
we
again.
learned how to do this.
If I run again,
But now we're going to discuss the if conditions.
I would
This
time I would
conditions are
type
like this.
75.
So the
and it
user,
says
imagine
your
the
score is
user
not A.
enters one
So
number.
if we
And
test this
here
code
we are
multiple
saying that
times,
if the number
either
is
of
greater
these
than
two
0,
statements
then
will
print
be
the number is
printed.
positive.
Like if I say 100,
Else if
15,
where we are
your score is
having
A.
another condition.
So there is no
Else
condition
if,
that checks
then we add another
if
condition,
the number
we use else
is
if.
at the
So
same
else if
time
in the
larger
bracket
and smaller than
number
certain values, so it pushes the number
lower
within
than
a range.
0. So
And also
smaller
because,
than 0,
as I
in
mentioned earlier,
parentheses,
these two conditions are
see out
vastly
the number
considering
is
everything
negative. And
that
another
integer number can have
else that we
there.
have is
So
that if
no
the number
else
is
condition
neither
is required for this
greater
example.
than 0
In
nor smaller
other
than 0,
videos,
we have
in
the
the
else,
continuing
the
of this
else
section, we are
that
going to
says that,
discuss
okay,
some
the
more
number
coding
is 0.
exercises that
So
help you to
generally
understand
it's
these
like
concepts
if the number is
easily
greater than
and grasp
0,
the
it prints
meaning
it's
behind
positive.
it.
So
if
if
the
the number is lower than 0,
you can put your hands on the keyboard and start
negative,
coding
and
to
if
leader by
neither
leader by
of the
trial and error
conditions
and
are
following
met,
some instructions,
it prints
you
whatever
can get
that we
the
want.
meaning
We can
behind
say
these
the number
if
is
conditions.
0,
Stay
or we
tuned.
can say neither of the conditions met. So whatever.
Welcome back
else,
to another
it says
lesson.
that
In today's lesson, we're going to talk
condition
about ternary
did
operator.
not meet. So
The ternary
this is the
operator
else if.
is
So
a
let's
shortened
run and try
way
with a
to
few
write an
examples to see what
if-else
happens.
statement in a single line. So it's a
So
compact
no
and
error, it's
efficient way to
compiling
make
now.
simple decisions in code.
The ternary
enter an
operator is
integer. I would
often
say 10.
used to simplify
So
and
it prints the
shorten the
number is positive because 10 is
conditional
greater than 0.
expressions. For example,
Let's
here
try
we
it
see
once
the
more.
condition we
So
want
I
to
would
check.
say
So we
minus
put it
12.
like here. The
So
syntax
the number is
looks
negative.
something
So
like this.
it works
So
correctly.
the condition
So if I
that we
mention
want to check
something
is
like
this place. And
like
then
0,
if this condition is
like here,
true,
it says neither of the conditions
then if this
are
condition
met.
is true, the expression returns value
Here
if
the
true.
simple version of the if
And
conditions.
otherwise,
What we
it
need to be
returns
careful about
value
is
if
how
false.
these if
And the question mark there
so what is
separates
important
the
is to know
condition
how
from the
these if
possible
conditions are
outcomes.
written.
So this is the
So
condition.
how
We
basically
separate
they're
it
written
from the
is that we
possible
have
outcomes,
the if,
and then we have the
then
value if true and
parentheses
value if false.
within
And
which we
colon
write
here
the condition. Like
separates the
here,
value
I say
if
that
true
if the
and the
number
value if
is
false.
greater
But
or equal
how it
90,
works, we
then
will
I
see
put the
in a few
brackets
seconds.
to
Here,
have the conditions. One
let's
bracket is here, another
uncomment
one is
some
here.
code
If I'm
that we
going to
have.
check another
So, for
if
example,
condition, this time we say else if.
previously we
Then within
learned
the
that
parentheses we mentioned number
if we
is
want to
lower than 90, for
understand
example, and
if a
then we have the
number
brackets,
is even or
and
odd,
then
we need to
see
write
out
an
the
if
result.
condition.
So in this
Here I am
situation, it is not efficient to have else.
one
Why?
integer
The
value
reason is
named
that
number
then a
with
number is
5,
either greater or
and
equal
we are
to 90
initializing
or lower
one
than
string
90.
named
So there is
result.
nothing that
So we say that
these
if the
two
number
wide conditions
is
cannot meet.
divided by 2
So this is
and
why
its
the else
remainder
condition
equals
is
to
not
0,
considered in this
so
example.
using the
So if we
modular
want
sign,
to
we can find the remainder.
run this
And the
code,
remainder is
it would be
the
something
remainder
like
is 0. The
this.
result will return
So
the
we get the
even.
input from the user,
However, if the result
and we compile.
if this condition is not correct, then the result is assigned with the
Now
odd.
that it is
So
compiling,
let's try and
okay,
check
it
it out.
asks to enter one integer. I would say 94.
Compiling here.
So the
No
result
error.
is
Yes,
your
so we
score
have
is
nothing
8.
in the output because we
Let's run again.
forgot to
If I run
see
again,
out. Here is the output.
This time I would type
and then we
75,
write
and it
result.
says your score is not
So
8.
this is important
So
to
if
show
we
the output
test
result
this code
also.
multiple times,
let's run again.
either of these two statements will be printed. Like if I say
So
115,
here is the output.
your
odd.
score is 8.
So this is
So
odd.
there is no
Why? Because
condition that
the
checks
number 5,
if the number is
when
at
it
the
is
same
divided
time
to 2,
larger
the
and
remainder does not
smaller than
equal 0.
certain value. So it
this is
pushes the
how we
number
used to
within
do
a
it
range.
while we were
And also
writing
because,
the
as I mentioned earlier,
if
these
conditions.
two conditions
However,
are
if we are
vastly
going to
considering
use ternary
everything
operators to
that
write the
integer
same
number
code,
has
it
there.
will
So
look
no
something
else
like this.
condition is required for this
So
example.
we ask the
other
user
videos,
to, for
in the
example, give us
continuing
one
of
number,
this section, we are
and
going
we store
to
the
discuss
result.
some more coding exercises
Then
that help you to
here,
understand these
instead of
concepts easily
these
and
lines
grasp
about
the
the
meaning
if and
behind it.
else
So you
conditions
can
checking, we simply
you can
write
put your
down the
hands on the
result
keyboard and start coding
equals,
to,
so we
little by
initialize the
little
result as
by
a string
trial
here
and error
directly.
and following some
The result
instructions,
equals
you can
number,
get the
and
meaning
here we
behind
write
these
down the
if
conditions.
conditions.
If you
Stay
remember,
tuned.
I mentioned this conditions, question mark, and two possibilities separated by a colon. Welcome back to another lesson. Number, if in today's lesson, we're going to talk about ternary operator. 0. The ternary operator is a shortened way separated with a question mark with the possible outcomes in a single line. And odd. So it's if this condition is true, to make simple decisions in code. Print the first ternary operator is often used to simplify and shorten the condition. It will conditional expression odd value. So the odd value, for example, will be assigned here we to result if this condition is not correct. We want to check. And if this condition is like correct, the syntax even is going like to be assigned. So the condition to the that we want to check is this place. And then if this condition is true, Then if this condition is true, the expression returns value if true
is even. The number
and
is even.
otherwise it returns value
let's
if
go through
false.
the analyzing the code
And the
once more.
question mark
So
there
here
separates the condition from the possible outcome.
Result,
so
and
this
its
is the
value
condition.
equals
We separate
to
it
the
from the
condition
possible
of
outcomes,
if
and
the
then we
number,
have the value if true,
this number
and value
is divided
if
by
false.
2,
And
its
column here
remainder
it
equals
separates the
0
value if true and the value
if this is correct.
if false.
The first
But
condition
how it works,
is
we will
even.
see
So
in a
even
few
will
seconds.
be assigned
Here,
to result.
and if
Let's
this condition
is not correct,
uncomment some code
then
that we have this. So, for example,
value, this
previously
result will be
we
assigned
learned
to this
that
result. Okay.
if
So,
we want
they are
to
separated by semicolon.
understand
And if
a number
we
is
simply
even
could
or odd,
check
we need
the
to write
condition in
an
one
if
line
condition
here.
However, here I am
used to check it in
initializing
like a few lines here,
one
like 4 or
integer
5
value
lines.
named number.
So when we have a straightforward
with
checking
number
condition,
5,
it will be
and
more
we are
efficient to use
initializing
ternary
one
operators.
string
In
named
the next
result.
lectures,
So we say that
practice some
if the
examples and
number
coding
is
exercises,
divided
so
by
it will
2
be
and its
more
remainder
clear for
equals
you
to
how
0,
it works.
so using the modulo sign we can find the remainder. And the remainder is, in today's lesson, we are going to
remainder
discuss
is 0.
logical operators.
The result will
so logical
return
operators
the
are
even.
used to combine or
However,
modify conditions
if the result,
if and else
if the
and other decision
if this
making
condition is
structure.
not correct,
So there are
then the result
two
it
main
is assigned with the
logical
odd.
operators.
So let's
there are
try
other
and check it
logical
out.
operators, but there are two main logical operators that we're
Compiling
going to
here.
discuss in today's lesson.
No error.
So for
Yes,
the
so we have
first
nothing
one
in the
is
output
the
because
AND
we
condition, and the
forgot
second
to
one
see out.
is the OR condition.
Here is the output.
So the AND condition
and then
is
we write
when we want to
result.
modify two things. If
So
you
this is important
remember
to
in
show the
previous
output result
exercises
also.
when we were
Okay,
having
let's
else
run again.
conditions and when we wanted if and else if conditions, when we wanted to check, for example,
So
to see if a number
here is the output
within
odd.
a range.
So
for
this
example,
is odd.
to
Why?
see
Because
if a number is
the number
between
5
10 and 20,
when it is
we
divided
had
to 2, the
define
remainder
one
does
if
not equal
condition
0.
saying that
So this is
if
how
the
we used to
number
do
is
it
larger than
while
10,
we were
and
writing the
in the statement on
if
in the
conditions.
statement
However,
of
if
this
we
if
are
condition
going to
as a
use
nested
ternary
if,
operators
we
to
were adding
write the
another
same
if
code,
saying that
it will
okay,
look
the first
something
if
like
is
this.
passed, the second if is to
So
see if the
we
number
ask
is
the user to, for example, give
smaller
us one
than
number,
20.
and we
So
store the
something like
result.
this. Let me write it down.
Then
Something
here,
like this. We
instead
were
of
like int
these lines about the if and
equals
else
22,
conditions
for example.
checking, we
And
simply
were
write
checking
down
to
the
see
result
if
equals.
A
So we initialize the result
greater
as a
than
string here
10.
directly. The result
Then
equals
we were
number,
checking
and
again
here we
if
write down the
A
conditions. If
is
you
lower
remember, I
than
mentioned this
20,
conditions, question mark,
and
and two
then we
possibilities
were
separated by a
saying
colon here. So number, if
correct
it's divided by 2,
number
its remainder
in the output.
equals to
Something
0.
like this.
So
You
it
see,
is
so there
now
is one if condition here
separated
and
with a
another
question
if
mark with the
condition here.
possible outcomes that are
However,
even and
using
odd.
the
So if this
AND
condition is
condition,
true,
we can
it's going
write
to
these
print the
examples
first
easier. So let's dive
true
in.
value here.
Let's
If
see
this is
how
not
it
true,
works. So for
it
example,
will
here,
print us the odd
I
value.
would
So the odd value
uncomment
will be
these
assigned to
lines
result if this condition is not correct.
to
And if this
see
condition is
how
correct,
it
even
works. So
is going
basically,
to
we
be
ask
assigned to the
the
result.
user to
So let's
enter
run.
their age, and if their age is
Let's run
above
the code and
18,
see.
and then we enter this state,
So
these
if I say
conditions of the
10,
if, and the statement
it returns the
consists
value
of if and
is
else
even. The
itself,
number is
saying
even.
that okay, now
So
it's above
there,
18,
let's
but
go
if
through the
it's
analyzing
below
the code once more.
65,
So
you
here
are
the
eligible
number
to work.
is
But
stored.
if it's
We
above
initialize a
18
string
and
called
it's not
result,
below
and its
65,
value
it's probably
equals
something like
to the condition
66
of
and
if
above. It
the
says
number,
you're not in
if
the
this
working
number
age
is
range.
divided by
And
2,
if
its remainder
age
equals
is not
0,
above 18 initially,
if this is correct, the first condition is even. So even will be assigned to result. And if this condition is not correct,
statement that we learned
then
already.
this value, this result will be assigned to this
like
result.
50,
Okay? So and they are separated by semicolon.
Eligible to
And
work.
if you see, we
However,
simply
there are
could
some ways
check the
to write
condition
this
in
code
one line here.
in an easier
However,
way using
we used to
logical
check it
operators.
in
So
like
it
a
makes
few
it
lines here,
more
like
efficient
4 or
and
5
concise.
lines.
So as you
So
see,
when we have a
everything is about
straightforward
efficiency
checking
in the code
condition,
tool
it would be more efficient to
having
use
a better
ternary
code.
operators.
So
In the
here
next
we are
lectures, we are
reading
going to
the age
practice
from
some
the
examples
user
and
and
coding
storing it.
exercises, so it
Instead of
will be
having
more
two
clear
conditions,
for
like
you
one
how
if
it
here
works.
and another nested if here, we are only having one if here.
Hello
Saying
again.
that
In today's
if
lesson, we are
age
going to discuss
equals
logical
greater
operators.
18
So
and
logical operators are
at the same
used to
time it is
combine or modify
equal, lower
conditions in
equal
if and
65,
else
then
if
you write
and other
in the
decision
output
making
that you're
structure.
eligible to work.
So there
The
are
second logical
two
operator
main
is this. So
logical
we say
operators.
else
There are
if,
other
then
logical
we
operators,
say
but there are
if
two
age
main
is below
logical
18,
operators that we are
or
going to discuss in today's lesson.
or
So for the first
using
one
these
is the
signs,
AND condition, and the
age is
second
above
one
65,
is
you're
the
not
OR
eligible to
condition.
work. So what are the
The
differences
AND
between
condition
and or?
is
So this is and
when we
this is
want to
or.
modify two things.
So
If you
and
remember
if we are
in
writing a
previous
condition
exercises,
statement
when we were
using
having
and,
else
it must
conditions, and
meet
when we
the
wanted if and
condition
else if
before
conditions,
and the
when we
condition
wanted to
after
check,
and
for
at the same
example, to
time.
see if a
So if
number
both
is
of these
within
two
a range.
conditions
For
are
example,
passed,
to see if
then
a number is
we
between
print
10
these to
and
the
20.
terminal.
We had
However,
to define
regarding the
one
OR
if condition
here,
saying
or
that
logical
if
operator,
the number is
if
larger than 10
either
and
of the
in the
conditions are
statement
met,
we print this one.
this
So
if
this is the
condition
difference.
as
a
both
nested
conditions
if,
should be met here
we
in the
were
AND
adding
operator,
another if.
but here
Saying
either
that,
of these should be
okay,
met.
the
Let's
first
try
if
this
is passed,
program
the
and
second
see
if is to see if the
how it
number
works.
is smaller than
So
20. So
okay,
something like this. Let me write it down.
say 18,
Something like this.
says
We
you're
were
not in
like
the
int
working
a
range because so
equals
it checks
22,
here
for example.
80
And
sorry
we were
80 is
checking
not
to
in this
see
range,
if
and then it
a
checks here, okay,
is
80 is
greater
passing
than
one of the
10.
conditions, then directly goes to this place.
Then we were
So
checking again
let's
if
try
a
another one.
is lower than
I would
20.
say like 10. It says
And
you're not in
then
the working
we
range
were
again
saying
because when it sees
correct
that the
number
10 is
in
lower
the
than
output.
18,
Something
it
like this.
directly prints that
You see, so
it's
there
not,
is
you're
one
not in
if
the
condition
working
here
condition.
and another
So
if
using
condition
logical
here.
operator will help us
However,
to have a more
using
efficient
the
and concise and
AND
shorter
condition,
lines of
we
code.
can write
It's nice to
these
think of
examples
how you
easier.
can
So
make
let's
your
dive
code
in.
more efficient
Let's
and not
see
just
how
to
it works.
write a
So
code
for
that
example
works, but
here,
an efficient
I
code
would
that works perfectly
uncomment
in a
these
shorter amount of
lines
time, in a lower number of
to see
lines to
how
write the
it
code and
works.
implement
So
it.
basically,
In the
we
next
ask
lectures, we are going
the
to
user
practice
to
some
enter their
logical
age,
operators.
and if their age is above 18, and
Hello
then
everyone,
we
welcome
enter
back to
this
another
state,
lesson.
these
Today we are
conditions
going
of the if,
to
and the statement
discuss about
consists
Boolean
of if
flags
and else
and how they
itself,
can be
saying that, okay,
integrated in
now
our
it's
if
above 18,
statement
but if
conditions
it's below
and if else
65,
conditions.
you
So
are
previously we
eligible to
learned
work. But if it's
about
above 18 and
logical
it's not
operators.
below 65, it's
For example,
probably
here
something like
we initialize one
66
integer, we
and
read the
above.
score from
It
the
says
user
you're
and then
not
store it.
in the
Then
working
using
age range.
and logical
And if
operators,
we
this
check
if
age
the number
is
is
not
above
above
50
18
initially,
and lower
it
than
says that you're
100,
not
then we print
in the
out
working age
you
range.
pass
So
the
let's
quiz,
compile this and
and
see how it
otherwise
works.
you failed. So this
So
we
this is
learned
if
previously.
statement that
Let's
we
try
learned
and
already.
see this one. So I would say, like, So for example, I would say if my
60,
score is
sorry, and it says you're
76,
eligible
it
to
says
work.
you passed the quiz. It's very
However,
straightforward.
there
We
are some
discussed this
ways
already.
to write this
However,
code in
if we
an easier way
integrate
using
Boolean
logical
flags into
operators,
this
so it makes
if-else
it
condition,
more efficient and concise.
it
So
gives
as
a
you see,
descriptive
everything is
name to
about
the condition,
efficiency,
making the
code to
purpose of the if
help
statement
having
clear
a better code
and easier to
so
understand
here we
when the
are
code is
reading
shared
the
with
age
others.
from
And also,
the user and
they can
storing
help
it.
keep track of
Instead
whether
of
something has
having two
happened
conditions,
or a
like one
specific
if
state
here
has
and
been reached
another
in your
nested if
program or
here,
not.
we are
So
only having
therefore, they
one
can
if
help
here,
us to
saying that
reduce the error
if
as well,
age
because we don't have to
equals
repeat
greater
certain
18
complex,
and
logic
at the same
repeatedly.
time it
So
is
let me give you an
equal
example. I will
lower
comment this
equal
part
65, then you write in the
and
output
then
that you're eligible
I will
to
do
work.
the same.
And the second logical
Um,
operator is this.
I will
So
rewrite the
we
same
say else if,
code,
then
however,
we say
using
if
the
age is
Boolean
below
flags.
18.
So instead of
Or
only initializing the
or
integer, I am
using
also
these
here
signs,
initializing a
age
Boolean
is
data
above
type that is
65,
called
you're
past
not
quiz.
eligible to work.
So
What is
here
what are
initially
the
I put it to
differences between
false.
and or? So this is
It's
and
your
this is
call,
or.
but usually
So
when we
and
want to
if we are
use
writing
the
a condition
Boolean
statement
flags,
using and,
we
it must
initialize them
meet
to a
the
false
condition
value,
before and the
then
condition
when
after
the
and at the same time.
when the
So
condition
if
is met,
both
we
of
set it
these
to
two
true.
conditions
So
are passed,
initially,
then
by default, they
we
usually
print
are
these to
false.
the terminal.
So
However,
here
regarding
we
the
show
or
the message to the
condition
user
here
saying
or
that enter your
logical
score and then
operator,
we store it.
if either of the
Here
conditions are met,
we mention that
we print this one.
if
So
the
this is the
score is
difference.
above
Both
50
conditions should be
and
met
less
here
than
in the AND
100
operator,
using
but
AND
here either
logical
of
operator,
these should
just
be
like
met.
before.
Let's
If
try this
this is the
program and
case,
see
don't right away
how it
print,
works.
okay, you passed the exam. Set the
So,
Boolean
okay,
flag to true instead of
18,
false. That was by
says you're
default
not in the
initialized.
working
So
range
set it to
because
true.
so
And
it
if this is
checks
the
here
case, set it to
80,
true.
80,
So we don't
sorry,
have to
80
write
is
the
not in this
else
range, and then
condition. So we are
it
avoiding
checks here,
writing this
okay,
else
80
condition.
is
We are just
passing one of the
writing one
conditions, then
if
directly
condition.
goes
So
to this
if this
place.
happens,
So
the
let's
condition is
try
passed.
another one.
Therefore, the passed quiz
I
boolean
would
is
say
set
like
to true.
10. It says you're not in the
Then,
working range again
in the
because
end,
when it
we
when it
can
sees that
check this
the
condition
10
saying
is
that
lower
if
than 18,
passed
it
quiz
directly prints that
equals
you're not in
true,
the working
then you
condition.
pass the
So
exam,
using
and
logical
else or
operator will help
otherwise
us to have
you
a more
failed.
efficient
Let's
and
try this
concise
one.
and shorter lines of code. It's nice to think of how you
So it's
can make your
compiling.
code
Now I
more
would
efficient
say
and not just to
75,
write
and
a
it
code
returns
that works,
pass.
but
Why?
an
Let's
efficient
analyze the
code
code.
that works perfectly in
Here
a
it
shorter
checks
amount of time, in a lower
checks
number of
the number with
lines
these
to
conditions.
write the
It
code and
passes and
implement
then
it. In
set
the
through to
next lectures,
passed
we are going
quiz,
to
and then
practice some
because the passed
logical
quiz
operators.
equals true, it prints that you passed the exam. Also, this part is redundant.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another
by default,
lesson.
when we use
Today
a
we are going
Boolean
to
flag, discuss
So
about
when we write
Boolean
no
flags and
conditions for
how
them,
they can
it
be
means that
integrated
if they
in
are
our
true,
if statement conditions
it's like
and
that.
if-else
So
conditions.
let's
So
compile
previously we
again.
learned about
So we can eliminate
logical
that code as I
operators.
mentioned.
For example,
So now I
here
would
we
say
initialize one
87,
integer, we read the
and
score
it
from
prints
the user
you
and then
passed the
store it.
quiz. And then
So
using
easily, you
and
don't even
logical
have to mention that
operators,
it
we check
equals
if the number
if
is
it
above
equals
50
true. The fact that you
and
put
lower
the
than
Boolean
100,
flag
then
there
we print out
without
you
anything,
passed
it
the
means
quiz,
that
and
okay,
otherwise
if
you
this is
failed.
true.
So
This
this
is
is something
learned
by
previously,
default
let's
known
try and
by the C++
see this one.
compiler.
So this way you can avoid the second else.
So for example, I would say if my score
And
is 76,
let the decision be
it
made
says you
only
passed
with
the
this
quiz.
one.
It's very
And
straightforward.
of course, you need to add
already.
another if
However,
conditions to
if we
print out the
integrate
result. But
Boolean
this
flags
way,
into
you are
this
making your
if-else
code to
condition,
be more
it
readable.
gives a
So
descriptive
its
name to the
readability
condition,
is
making the
increased, and it
purpose
is
of the
very
if
common
statement
among
clear
programmers to
and
use
easier to
Boolean flag
understand
because
when the code is
it
shared
gives a
with others, and
description to
also
your if condition.
they
So
can help
this
keep
if
track of
condition
whether
is
something has
defined
happened
because we want to
or a
make sure
specific
if
state
the
has been
person
reached in your
is
program or
passed or
not.
not.
So
Therefore,
they
here,
can help us to
okay, after reading the code, we
understand
understand that
well,
yes,
because
this
we
if
don't have
condition
to
is
repeat
defined because we
certain
want to check if
complex
the guy is
logic
is passing the
repeatedly.
test or not.
So let me give you an
However,
example.
it is
I will
only
comment
showing
this
a
part,
message saying that, but in this place
and
we
then
are assigning
I
true
will
to
do the
past quiz. So you
same.
see the difference. Difference is that this code is
I will
more
rewrite the
readable. It
same
reduces the error
code,
and
however,
helps
using the
to
Boolean
increase the
flags.
readability
So
of your
instead
code.
of only
Thank you for watching. In
initializing
next
the
lectures, we are
integer,
going to
I am
practice a little
also
bit
here
if
initializing a
statements with
Boolean
Boolean
data
flags.
type.
That is called past quiz. So here
Hello everyone,
initially I
welcome to
put it
another
to
lesson.
false.
Today we are going to talk about
It's your
switch
call,
function.
but usually
So the
when we
switch
want to use
statement is a
the
control
Boolean flags,
structure used in C++
we
to
initialize them to a
simplify
false
decision making
value,
when dealing with
and
multiple
then
conditions.
so it is
When
an
the condition
efficient
is
and
met,
readable
we set it
alternative
to
to
true. So
initially
using
by
multiple
default
if-else
they
statements,
usually
especially
are
when
false.
we have several
So
potential
here
outcomes.
we show the
So
message to the
it
user
helps
saying that
us
enter
to
your
have
score and then we store it.
a more organized code and
Here
more clearly
we mention that
handling
if
outputs
the
when we
score
have
is above
like
50
several of them.
and less
So
than
let's
100
start with an
using
example.
and
Here
logical
we
operator
use
just like
if-else
before. If this is the
conditions. We
case,
say, okay,
don't
we
right away
initialize
print
the
okay
integer
you
called
passed the
day,
exam with the value
set
of
the
3.
Boolean
Then we say
flag
if day
to true
equals 1
instead of
print
false.
Monday.
That was if
By
it
default
equals
initialized
2, print Tuesday,
so set
etc.
it to
until
true.
the end.
And
Until
if this is the case, set it to
day
true.
7,
So we don't have to
day
write the
equals
else
7, print
condition.
Sunday.
So we are avoiding
And
writing this
else
else condition.
invalid
We're just
input.
writing
So all
one
of them, the first
if
one is
condition.
if,
So
the,
if
the
this
other
happens,
ones are else if
the
until
condition is
the
passed.
end.
Therefore,
If
the
neither
past
of the
quiz
above
boolean
conditions
is
are
set
correct,
to true.
just print invalid data.
Then
So let's try this
in
code
the end
and see how it
we
works.
can check this condition saying that if past quiz
So it
equals
is
true,
printing Wednesday,
then you
because
pass the
we
exam,
mentioned
and
the day
else
equals
or
3,
otherwise
then
you
3
failed.
here, and
Let's
we
try
are
this one.
printing the Wednesday.
But as you can see here, we're checking many conditions, and it's really
it's
hard to go
compiling.
through
Now I
all
would
these
say
lines because there are many
75, and it
conditions to
returns
be checked.
pass. Why?
Instead of doing this, we can use switch
Here
condition.
it
But
checks
let's
the
first discuss
it
how
checks
switch
the
condition
number
structure
with
would be.
these conditions.
So instead
It
of saying if,
passes
we
and
write
then
switch,
set true to
then
past
we
quiz,
write
and
down
then
the variable
because
in
the
the
past quiz
parentheses.
equals true,
Then we open the
it
bracket,
prints that you
and
passed
when
the
we
exam.
open
Also,
the bracket,
this part
we
is
check the
redundant. We
case
can also
with
remove
the
this. So by
first
default, when we use a Boolean
condition,
flag,
again case,
so
second
when we write
condition,
no conditions for them, it
case
means
with
that
the third
if they are
condition,
true,
and
it's
then
like that.
as a
So
default,
let's
it
compile
is
again.
exactly working like else. So if neither
So
of
we
the
can
above
eliminate
mentioned
that part as
cases
I
were there,
mentioned.
we use
So
the
now
default.
I would
When
say
we write down the
87,
case,
and
we
it
write
prints
down the
you passed
conditions.
the quiz.
We put so easily you don't
Semicolon,
even
and we
have
go
to
to the
mention
next
that
line.
it equals
And we
if it
execute the
equals
code
true.
whatever
The fact
we
that you
want,
put
and
the
then we
boolean
must
flag
write
there
down break
without
so
anything,
the program
it means that
exit when
okay,
enters
if this
this
is true, this is something by
statement
default
after
known by the
executing
C++
whatever it needs to
compiler.
execute, it breaks.
So this
Otherwise,
way you
it
can
also
avoid
goes
the
for the
second
next
else,
case, and it also goes for the next case. So
and
it
let
is
the
important for
decision
us
be made
to
only
manually
with this
break
one.
it. So let's
And of course, you need to
do
add
the example.
another
It would
if
be more
conditions
clear
to print out your result. But
how it
this
works.
way, you are making your
So
code to be more
let me
readable.
uncomment
So
these
its
lines,
readability is increased, and it is
and
very common
then
among
we run
programmers to
the
use
code
Boolean
that we
flag
have
because
here.
it gives a description to your if condition. So this if
So
condition
already
is
when
defined
looking at
because we
this
want to
code
make sure
and
if the
comparing
person
it with this
is
code,
passed or not.
you see that
However,
even
here,
it looks
okay, after
nicer.
reading the code,
There
we
are some
understand that
spaces
yes, this
between
if
them, and you
condition
can
is
read it
defined because
much
we want to
easier,
check if the
much
guy
easier.
so
Is
we say
passing the test or
the
not.
input.
However,
However,
is
it is
day,
only
and it is
showing
set
a
to
message
3,
saying
and instead
that.
of if, we
But
write down
in
switch,
this
and we
place,
put
we
the
are
day.
assigning
So
the
true
day
to
is
past
our
quiz. So
variable
you
that
see
we
the
are
difference. Trying
difference
to
is that this
check some
code is more
conditions
readable, it
over this
reduces the
variable.
error and
Then,
helps
instead of having
to
multiple
increase the
if-else if
readability of your
conditions,
code.
we are just
Thank you for
mentioning
watching. In
case,
next lectures, we are going to practice a little bit
case until
if
the
a
end.
statement. So
So if
with Boolean
case,
flags.
instead of saying if
day equals 1, we say case 1.
Hello everyone, welcome to another lesson. Today we are going to talk about
day
switch
equals
function.
1. But instead of writing
the
all of
switch
those things, we
statement
say
is a
case
control
1, case 2,
structure
case
used
3.
in
It
C++
means that
to
when
simplify decision making when dealing with multiple
equals
conditions.
1, equals
So
2,
it is an
equals 3. But we
efficient
don't
and
write those
readable
things. This is why
alternative
it
to
makes the program much
using
easier.
multiple
And
if-else
then
statements,
we have a
especially
semicolon, we
when
go
we
to
have
next line,
several potential
and we say,
outcomes.
okay, if you enter
So
this
it
condition,
helps us to
print
have
Monday. If you enter this
a more
condition, print
organized
Tuesday,
code
etc.
and
until the
more
end. And
clearly handling
we need to remember
outputs
we don't
when
have
we
to
have
forget this
like
break.
several of them.
We need to
So
write down
let's
the break
start with an
at the end
example.
of each case.
Here
And
we
there
use
is
if-else
instead of having
conditions.
instead
We
of
say,
having the
okay,
else
we
after having
initialize
all of
the
these
integer
cases,
called
we have
day
with the
default
value of
here,
3, saying that
then
if
we say
neither
if
of the
day
above
equals 1,
things
print
happened,
Monday.
if none
If
of
it
them were true,
equals 2, print
so you just
Tuesday,
simply
etc. until the
print
end,
out
until
invalid
if
day number. So
day
let's try and see
7,
how it works.
day equals 7, print Sunday, and else invalid input. So all of them, the first
it is
one
printing
is if,
again
the other ones
Wednesday.
are
So it's
else
much
if
straightforward,
and
and
if
it is
neither of
more
the above conditions
readable
are correct,
as compared to
just
using
print if
if
condition.
conditions.
So
let's
when we
try this
have
code
a lot of
and
conditions
see
to
how
be
it
checked,
works.
it's easier to use a switch statement. So as you see here in this course, I'm giving you different tools, and I'm teaching you different tools that are used in C++.
Here, and we
and
are
based
printing
on
the
what you
Wednesday.
want to do based
But
on the
as you can see
application of your
here, we're
code, you
checking
need
many
to
conditions,
wisely
and it's
choose
really hard
these
to go
tools.
through
So
all
you
these
can
lines because there are
use if
many
conditions until
conditions to be
forever,
checked.
and you can use it always.
Instead
But
of
is
doing
it
this,
efficient?
we
No,
can use
probably there are
switch
some
condition.
cases that you
But
need to
let's
write it with
first
Boolean
discuss
flags,
how switch
you need to
condition
write it with
structure
switch
would be.
statement, etc.
So instead of saying
these
if,
are
we
only
write switch,
toolboxes
then
that I'm
we
offering,
write down
and
the variable
depending
in
on your
the
application,
parentheses.
you need to first
Then we open the
clearly
bracket,
think
and
about
when
all
we
of
open
these
the
tools and
bracket,
see
we check
how
the case
use
with the
how
first
using these tools and
condition,
when
again
using these
case,
tools would
second
be
condition,
beneficial for you to write a more
case with
concise
the
and
third condition,
efficient code. And then as a default, it is
Hello
exactly
everyone,
working
welcome
like
back.
else. So if
Today
neither
we're
of
going
the
to talk
above
about
mentioned
for loops.
cases were there,
So there are
we
different
use
types
the
of
default.
loops that we
When
can go
write
over
down the
a
case,
certain
we
data
write down
type,
the conditions, we
for
put
example, list, strings,
semicolon, and
etc.
we go to the next line,
iterate over
and
them.
we
However,
execute the
today
code
we're
whatever we
focusing on
want,
for
and
loops
then we must
specifically.
write
But
down
in this
break.
section,
So
we're going
the
to discuss
program
different for loops
exit
as well.
when enters
So, for
this,
example, imagine that we
statement
would like to
after
print
executing
a few
whatever it
numbers,
needs to execute, it
and
breaks.
it would be very
Otherwise,
hard to
it
do it
also
easily.
goes for the next
Like,
case, and it also
for
goes for the
example,
next case.
I could
So
say
it is important
cout
for us to manually break it. So let's
number
do
one
the example. It would be more clear
and L.
how
So I
it
wanna
works.
write, like, imagine that I would
So
like to print number 1 to
let me
5. So I
uncomment
need to
these
do it
lines,
5 times. So I
then we
modify
run
this.
the code that we have
I
here.
put 5 here. I put 4 here. So now I need to print
So
this
already
one.
when looking at this code
So let's
and comparing it
compile
with this
and
code,
see.
you see that even it looks nicer. There are some spaces between them, and you can
So
read
yeah,
it
here
much
you
easy,
see when I want to
easier.
print 5
So we
numbers,
say
I need
the
to write
input
it down
is
5
day,
times.
and
Okay,
it is
but
set
for
to
5
3,
times
and
it may
instead
be
of
still
if, we
okay.
write down switch, and
But
we put
what
the
if
day.
it's
So the day
500
is our
times? It would
variable
be
that we
very
are
hard to,
trying
track
to,
the
check some
changes, to
conditions
modify everything,
over this
and at
variable.
least copy paste it. Even
Then,
copy pasting
instead
it
of
for
having multiple
500
if,
times,
else,
it's not
if
easy job.
conditions,
So
we
there
are
are
just mentioning
other
case,
ways to do it,
case,
and
case,
in
case until the end.
programming you
So if case, instead of saying if
something that can
day
give us
equals 1, we
the
say
best
case
and
1.
most
It
efficient way of
means
coding.
if
So in order to
day
do that,
equals
we
1.
need
But
to use
instead of writing all of those things, we say case
loops
1, case 2,
generally,
case 3.
and
It
today
means
I'm
that
going to
when
tell you
case,
how to
our
use
case,
for
which is
loops to
day
do
here,
that.
equals
So
1,
imagine
equals 2, equals 3. But we don't write those things. This is
from
why it
number
makes the
0
program much
to
easier.
number 4.
And then
To
we
do
have
that,
a semicolon, we go to the
we
next
come
line,
up with the
and we
for
say,
function.
okay, if you enter this condition,
We have
print
parentheses
Monday.
within
If you
which
enter
there
this
are
condition,
3
print
main
Tuesday, etc.
components
until the end.
in this
And we don't
parentheses.
So in the
we need
first
to remember we
component,
don't
we
have to forget
initialize
this break. We need to
there
write
has
down
to
the break
be
at
whatever
the end of
the
each
initial
case.
number of loop
There is,
would like
instead of
to
having
be.
instead of
So
having the
here in
else,
our
after
case,
having
we
all of these cases, we have a
integer
default
named
here
I
saying that
that
if
starts
neither
from
of the
0.
above
Then
things
we have
happened, if
semicolon
none of them were
separating the
true,
first part from
so
the
you just simply
we
print
have
out
this
invalid
I
number. So let's try and see
until
how it works.
it reads like this. This I until it is smaller than 5.
It is printing
Not
again
smaller
Wednesday,
equal
so
than
it's
5,
much
only smaller
straightforward
than
and
5.
it is more
Then
readable as compared to using if
semicolon
conditions. So
saying
when we
I
have
plus
a lot
plus.
of
And
conditions to
I
be checked,
means that
it's easier
increment
to use
value of
switch
I. I'm going to
statement.
discuss this in a
So
few
as you
seconds.
see here in this course,
So
I'm giving
for
you different
these are
tools and
the
I'm
three
teaching you different
components of a
tools that
for
are
loop
used
in
in C++.
parentheses. And then
And
we
based
start the
on
loop
what you
actually
want to do
as
based
of
on the
here.
application of your
So
code,
as of
you
here,
need to wisely
we start
choose
going
these
through the
tools.
loop
So you can
saying that
you can
out
use if
I, we
conditions
print
until
I,
forever,
so we
and you can use
understand
it always.
the
But is
value
it
of I.
efficient?
It's a
No.
printing
Probably
in
there are
the
some cases
terminal,
that you
so
need
it
to write it
makes
with
more
Boolean flags. You need to write
it
it with switch
increase the
statement,
readability of the
etc.
code,
So
and then we
these
print
are
the
only
actual value of the I.
toolboxes that
But
I'm
how
offering,
does
and
it work? Let's see.
depending on your
So first
application,
we
you need
start
to
from
first
I equals
clearly think
0.
about
When we
all of
start
these
from
tools
I
and see
equals
how
0,
use
we
how
enter this
using
loop,
these
we
tools
mention
and when
I
using these
semicolon,
tools would
then we
be
print the
beneficial
value
for you
0.
to write a more concise
Then
and
after that,
efficient code.
we increase one time the value I. So
Hello
initially
everyone,
we
welcome
enter the
back.
loop with the
Today
I
we are going to
equals
talk
0.
about for loops.
We printed
So
the
there are
value
different
0
types of loops that we can
using
go over,
this
a certain
line,
data type,
and
for example,
when
list,
everything
strings,
is finished
etc.
here, it
Iterate
goes
over
back.
them.
It
However,
goes
today
back
we are
again
focusing
into
on
this,
for
but
loops
because we
specifically.
have
But in this
incremental
section, we are
value
going to
of
discuss
I,
different for
I
loops
is
as well.
now
So, for
equal
example,
1.
imagine that we
And
would like to
then
print
with the value
a few
1,
numbers,
it again enters
and it would
this
be
loop
very hard
and
to do it
prints
easily.
1 for us here.
Like,
It iterates
for example,
until
I
it
could say
reaches
see out
to this condition. So until it is
number
smaller than 5.
1
So it iterates until
and
it is
del.
4. When
So
it's
I
4,
want to
it
write
breaks
like
and
imagine
we
that I
exit
would
the
like to print
loop.
number
So
1
let's
to
try
5.
and see
So
how
I
it
need
works.
to do it 5 times. So I modify this. So now we're
I
compiling.
put
Okay, 5 here. I put 4
So here,
here.
as you
So
see,
now
it starts with
I
the
need to
value
print
0.
this one.
It prints I semicolon 1
So
space
let's
0. Then
compile
it goes up
and see.
again and enters the loop with value 1. It prints I semicolon,
So yeah,
I
here
colon
you see
space
when I want
1,
to print 5
and then
numbers, I need to
it is
write it down
incremented
5
again.
times. Okay, but
And
for
it
5
does
times it may
this
be still okay.
iteratively
But
until
what if
I
it's
reaches
500
4.
times?
When
It would
I
be very
reaches
hard
4,
to,
it
track
enters
the
one more
changes to
time to the
modify
loop
everything,
saying that cout
and at
I
least copy
colon
paste it. Even copy
space
pasting
print
it for
4,
500
and
times,
then
it's not
when
easy
it
job. So there are
incremented
other
to the
ways
value
to do
of
it, and
5,
it does not
in
satisfy
programming
the second part of our
something
for
that can
loop, so
give us
it does not enter
the
again
best
and
it
most
finishes the loop.
efficient way of
So
coding.
this is
So
how
in
we
order
can
to do
print
that,
something
we
like
need
to
5 times. Even if we want, we can
to
say like
use
loops. Instead of
generally,
5, we can
and
put
today
like
I'm going to
we
tell
can
you
put like
how
20
to use for
so
loops
whatever
to
the
do
number
that.
that we would like,
So
we
imagine
just put it here,
from
and it
number
will just
0
go for
to
it.
number 4. To do that, we
Let's
come
see.
up
Yeah.
with the
So here
for
it
function
starts from 0 to
we have
19,
parentheses within which
and
there are
if we want
3
to
main
print
components
number
in
20
this
as well,
parenthesis.
we can say
So in the first
smaller
component,
equal
we
20, and
initialize
instead we could say, for example,
there
let's
has
start
to
from
be
1 this time,
whatever
the initial number of the loop would like to be.
So here
let's
in
see.
our case, we
Okay, great. So we
named
started from
I
1 and
that
we're printing
starts
until
from
20.
0.
So generally,
Then
this
we
is
have
one of the
semicolon
most
separating
efficient
the
way
first
of
part
printing
from the
iteratively instead of just
we have
printing
this
everything
I
manually.
until
next
it
lectures
reads
we're
like
going
this.
to solve some
Until
exercises and do some coding exercises to
smaller than
understand
5.
it better.
There's
So
not
generally the
smaller
important thing is
equal
that we
than
write the
5,
for,
only
we
smaller
have
than 5.
parentheses within which
Then
three parts needs to be filled, and then we enter the loop.
I++. And I++ means that the increment value
Hello
of
everyone,
I.
welcome to another session. Today we are going to do some coding exercises
these are
using
the
for loops.
three components
We are
of a
going
for
to
loop in
write a
parentheses,
program
and
that
then we
prints
start
even
the loop
numbers
actually
from 1 to 10. To do that, we start right away
through
with the
the
for
loop,
loop.
so we
Saying
start
that
right
see
away with the
out
for loop,
I, we
and
print I, so we
open the
understand
parentheses,
the value of I. It's a
and
printing
here
in
there are
the
three parts
terminal,
to
so it
respect.
makes
The first
more
one we initialize one,
it increased the
for example,
readability
here
of the
integer
code,
value
and then we
equals
print the
1,
actual
and
value
we
of
set the
I.
upper bound
How does it
for
work? Let's see.
our
So
integer
first we
value
start from
here
I
because we want
equals
to start
0.
from 1
When we
and
start
go
from I
up
equals
to
0,
10,
we say smaller
we enter
equal
this
10,
loop,
and we
we
have the
mention
incremental value saying that okay,
then we
first
print
1,
the value
then
0.
increase it one time,
Then
then
after
increase it
that,
another time. So we use
we
incremental values for
increase
that.
one time the value
When
I. So initially we entered the
finish
loop
the
with
three
the
parts
I
of the
equals
for
0.
loop condition,
We
in the
printed the value
parentheses we
0
enter the for loop
using
actually.
this line
Here, because we only would like to print
and
the even
when
numbers,
everything is finished
we
here,
write one if
it
condition
goes
here.
back.
So we
It
say
goes
if
back
this
again into
I
this, but
is
because we
divided
have
by 2 and its
incremental
remainder
value of
equals
I,
0,
I
is
then
now
see
equal
out
1.
I.
Otherwise,
Then
we
with
don't
the
want it.
value
So
1,
else we don't write
again
it because we don't want to
enters
print
this
anything
loop
in the
and
loop because
prints
it is
1
going to
for
be
us here.
printed
It iterates
for
until
those
it reaches
that don't have the
to this
remainder
condition.
equal
So
to 0.
until it is
So let's
smaller
print
than
this
5.
one and see how
So
it
it
works.
iterates until it is 4. When it's 4, it breaks,
So it
and
starts
we
from
exit
1.
the loop. So
1
let's try
comes
and see
here,
how it
and
works.
1 is divided by 2. Its remainder equals 0. No, so it does not do anything.
Now we're
Then it
compiling.
goes and comes back with 2.
So here, as you
2
see, it
starts
2
with the
divided
value
by
0.
2.
Its remainder
It prints
equals
I
0. Then 2 is
1
printed,
space,
0.
and then
3
it
comes here,
goes up
and
again,
when 3
and
comes
enters the loop
here,
with value
3
1.
divided by 2,
It
its
prints
remainder
I
is not 0.
semicolon,
Then it is
I
doing nothing,
colon
and it's printing
space
nothing.
1, and
Then
it goes
it
until it
reaches the
is
last
incremented
number.
again.
So
And
iteratively
it
it goes
does
up. And
this
here we could, like, for
iteratively
example, we could
until
write
I
something like
reaches 4.
else.
When I reaches 4,
And
it
then
enters one more
here
time to
see
the loop,
out
saying that see out I colon
like
space print
this
4,
part,
and then
here.
when it incremented to the value of 5,
here,
it does
if
not
I do
satisfy
this, it is
the
going to print 1, 3,
second
5
part
because
of
1,
our
3,
for
5,
loop,
7,
so it does not
9,
enter
basically
again,
all the odd
and
numbers,
it
because
finishes
odd
the loop.
numbers are
So
not
this is
going
how
to
we
pass
can
this loop.
print
They're going
something
to
like
enter
5 times. Even
they're
if we
not
want,
going
we
to
can
pass
say
this
like
condition, the first
instead
condition.
of
They're
5,
going
we
to
can
be
put like
in the
we can
second
put like
condition.
20.
So let's compile
So
this
whatever
one.
the number that we would like, we just put it here, see how it works, and it will just
it is
go for
printing
it.
everything now, and it's hard to distinguish the
Let's see.
result.
Yeah.
This is
So
why
here it
we
starts
avoid
from
using
0
else
to 19.
condition. We
And
just want
if we want
the
to
ones
print
that are
number
having the
20 as well, we can
remainder
say
equals to 0 to
smaller
be
equal
printed.
20.
And if
And
we
instead
wanted
we
to, for
could say,
example, print
let's
the
start
numbers
from
that
1 this
are
time.
odd, we could write like this. So if
let's
I
see.
divided by 2, its remainder does not equal 0.
Great.
This
So
is
we
going
started
to
from
print us
1
all
and
the
we're
odd
printing
numbers.
until 20.
So let's try.
So generally, this is one of the most efficient way of printing iteratively instead of just printing everything manually.
So it's compiling.
In next lectures, we're going to solve some exercises and do some coding exercises to
I is
understand
divided
it
by
better.
2.
So
Its
generally,
remainder
the
does not
important thing
equal
is that
0.
we
Then
write
it
the
is
for,
print.
we have
Then
parentheses
for
within which
second,
three parts needs
for
to
number
be
2,
filled,
number 2,
and
I
then
gets
we
the value
enter the loop. Equals 2. It enters, 2 is divided by 2, its remainder
Hello everyone, welcome to
actually,
another session.
and
Today we are going to do
loop
some
now.
coding
And
exercises
then
using for
it
loops.
prints nothing.
We are going
Then
to
I is
write a
incremented
program
one
that
more time.
prints
Now its
even
value
numbers
is
from 1 divided by 2, its remainder does not equal 0, then it enters the if condition and it prints the value. So this is how it works, and generally we can play with it like if we want to print all the odd numbers between
the first
1
we
and
initialize
100. So
for
it's
example,
easy
here
to do it,
integer
but
value
manually
equals
doing
1,
that, it takes a lot
and
of
we
time.
set the upper bound for our integer value here
So
because we want to
here
start from 1 and go
we see that
up
yeah,
to
it is
10.
printing
We say
almost
smaller
not
equals
almost
10,
but
and we have the
all the odd
incremental value
numbers
saying that
are
okay,
between
first
1
1,
and
then
100.
increase
So this is
it
one
time,
example,
then
very
increase it
small
another
example,
time.
very
So we use incremental
easy
values for
example
that.
of how
When
important
we
for
finish
loops
three
are.
parts of the for
However,
loop
we will see in
condition
other
in the
levels like
parentheses, we
intermediate and
enter
advanced
the for
level
loop actually.
that
Here,
we
because we
use
only
these
would
loops
like to print the
very
even
frequently
numbers,
to do very
we
advanced
write
tasks. For
one if
example, if you
condition
want
here.
to
So we
find
say
a
if this
maximum,
I
the maximum
is
number
divided by
in a
2 and
list of
its
numbers.
remainder
So
equals
we
0,
do iteratively, we go
then
through all the elements of that list, for example,
we don't want it. So
then we
else
write
we don't
some
write it because we don't want to print
coding
anything in the loop
there
because
to find
it is
the
going to be
maximum
printed
number in a list, for example,
for
or the
those
minimum number, and then
that
we want to do
don't
some
have their
mathematical
remainder
operations
equal
for
to
that
0.
maximum
So
number,
let's
etc.
print
So
this one,
these are
see
very
how it
useful,
works.
especially if we are going through a lot of
So it
data, a
starts
list
from
with a
1.
lot of inputs, for
1
example, a
comes
lot
here,
of elements. So
and 1 is
imagine that
divided
there
by
are
2, like
its remainder equals
1000
0. No,
elements
so
in
it
one
does
list,
not
and
do
you would like to
anything.
find
Then
the
it goes
maximum
and
number.
comes back with
Manually
2.
doing that, it would
2
be very
is
hard.
2
It takes a lot
divided
of
by
time.
2,
It
its
increases the
remainder
error,
equals
etc.
0. Then 2
But
is printed,
doing
and then
programming,
3 comes
this is
here.
why we are
And
programming.
when
In fact,
3
it
comes
can give us
here,
the
3
result very
divided by
fast.
2, its remainder it's not 0. Then it
Hello
is
everyone,
doing nothing
welcome
and
back.
it's printing
Today
nothing.
we're going to talk about
And it
another
goes
way
until it reaches the last
to
number.
write
So
loops,
iteratively it
and
goes up.
here
And
in
here
this
we could,
lesson,
like, for
after finishing
example,
the
we
for
could
loops
write
in a
something
previous
like
lesson, we're going to
else,
focus on while
and
loops or while
then
conditions.
here
So there
see
are
out
different types of
I,
loops that we can employ
like
to write
this
a
part
certain number of
here.
blocks to print certain number of blocks and
So
execute
here,
certain
if
number
I
of
do this, it
codes,
is going
and
to
one of
print
them
1,
was
3,
for
5,
loops, and
because
the other
1,
one
3,
is
5,
while loop.
7,
So
9, basically
here
all the
the
odd
structure
numbers, because
of a
odd
while
numbers
loop,
are not
a
going
while
to
loop would
pass
be
this
like
loop. They're
we
going
say
to enter,
while and then the
they're not going to
condition,
pass this
and
condition,
then we
the first
enter
condition.
the
They're going to
executive
be
part.
in the second
And
condition.
this
So
is the
let's
place where
compile
we
this
write
one,
down our code. So let's start with an example. I
see
think
how
it
it
would be
works.
easier to grasp the idea
Yeah,
when
so
we
it is printing everything
make
now.
an example.
It's
So
hard to
here
distinguish
previously
the result. This is why here
used to
we
go through the
avoid
for loop.
using
So if we want
else
to write a number
condition. We
to
just
write a
want
program that
the ones that
prints
are
us
having the
number 1 to 5, we
remainder
had to
equals to 0 to
write
be
like
printed.
for
And if we wanted to, for example,
for
print
loops,
the numbers that
something
are
like this. Let me just type it
odd,
down.
we could write like this. So if
Int
I divided by
equals
2,
1,
its remainder
I
does not equal 0. This is going
smaller
to print
equals
us all the
5,
odd numbers. So let's
plus
try.
plus. And then we could say, okay, print I and L. So this is how we used to print
So
number
here,
1 to 5 previously.
for example,
However,
I is
if we
divided
want
by
to do
2,
the
its
same
remainder
thing
does not
but
equal
using
0,
while
then
loop,
it is printed.
we
Then
can
for
break
second,
down
for
these
the
for
three
number
parts
2,
of
number
the for
2
loop
I
into
gets the
different
value
parts.
equals 2.
So
First
it
we
enters 2 is
initialize
divided by 2,
the
its
integer number
remainder
named
equals
num
0
has to be
actually,
1, and
and
then
it
we
does
start
not
the
enter
while loop.
this
So we
loop
start
now.
the while loop, and
Then
in the
it
parentheses
prints
we only
nothing.
write down
Then
one part
I
of the
is
condition, which
incremented
is
one more time.
as
Now its
long as
value
num
is 3.
smaller
3
equal 5.
divided by
So the
2, its
condition would be
remainder
something
does
like
not
this.
equal 0. Then it
So we
enters
repeat
the
the
if condition
while
and it prints
as
the value.
long as
So this is
num
how it
is
works. And
smaller,
generally we can
less
play
than
with it
or
like
equal
if we want to
5.
print all the
Then we
odd
enter
numbers
the
between
loop.
1
So
and
we print out
100.
the num.
So
And
it's easy to
here
do it, but
we
manually doing
are
that, it takes a lot of
incrementing the
time.
value of num ourselves. So previously we
So
used to
here
put this part in the
we see that yeah,
parentheses, but
it
we
is
are
printing
putting the
almost, not almost, but
increment part inside the loop. And previously we used
So this is
to
one example,
initialize the
very small
integer in the
example, very
parentheses, and we are
easy
initializing it
example of
before the loop.
how
And then we
important
are
the for loops
printing
are.
the
However, we will see in other
the
levels
num
like
using
intermediate
this
and
cout
advanced
function,
level,
and also the
that
second part of
we
the
use these
parentheses for
loops
the for loops
very
is
frequently to do
exactly
very
printed
advanced
here.
tasks. For
So the
example,
reason
if you want to
why
find
we
a
will need
maximum,
to use,
the
for
maximum
example, while
number
loops
in
to
a list of
execute our
numbers.
code
So we do
is
iteratively,
because
we go through
a while
all
loop
the
in C++
elements of that list, for
is
example,
can help
and
us to
then we write some
repeatedly execute a block of code like
coding
similar to the for
there
loop.
to find the
However, the
maximum
while loop
number in a
is
list, for
more
example, or the
straightforward
minimum
and
number, and then
often
we
is
want to do
used
some
when the number
mathematical
of
operations
iteration
for that
is
maximum
not
number,
known
etc. So
beforehand. So
these
when
are
we
very
don't know
useful,
how
especially
many
if you're
iteration
going
do we
through
need, a lot
we
of
simply
use
data,
a
a
while
list with
loop,
a
and we
lot of
say as
inputs, for
long
example,
as
a
the
lot of
num
elements. So imagine that
less
there
than
are
or equal
like
5, just do this for
1000
us, and then
elements
change
in one
the
list, and we would
value
like
of
to
num.
find
So we
the
can increase
maximum
it
number.
or decrease
Manually
it
doing
as
that,
we
it
want
would
to see
be
in this
very
line.
hard, and it takes a lot of
However,
time, it
if we
increases the
forget to
error,
write
etc.
this part, it
But
will become
doing
like
programming,
an
this is why
infinite
we are
loop,
programming.
because
In
it
fact,
is
it can
printing,
give us the
for example,
result
num
very
equals
fast.
1, it enters the loop, it prints 1, and then it
Hello
prints 1,
everyone,
and then it
welcome
prints
back.
1
Today we are
forever
going
until
to
we
talk
stop the
about
program,
another
because
way
1 is not being
to
increased. So when we
write
increase
loops,
the
and here in this
value
lesson, after finishing the for
by
loops in
1
a previous
here,
lesson,
then
we're
the
going
next
to
time that it
focus on
enters
while loops or while
the loop, it's
conditions.
2, then it's
So there
3,
are
etc.
different
So
types
let
of
me
loops
just
that we can employ to
run the
write
program and see how it
a
works.
certain number of blocks to print certain number of blocks and execute certain number of codes, and one of them
So yeah,
was for loops, and the
so
other one
here
is while loop.
num
So
equals 1,
here the structure
and
of a while
when we
loop,
want to go through the
while loop
condition
would
of the
be
while
like
loop, we
we
say, okay,
while,
num
and
equals
then
1.
the
Num
condition,
is
and then we
less than
enter
or
the
equal
executed
5.
part.
Yeah, it passed the
And
conditions,
this
it
is
enters
the
the
place
loop,
where
it
we
prints
write
1.
down
Then it
our
increased
code.
the
So
value
let's
of
start with
num
an
by
example.
1,
I think
so
it would be
num would be
easier to
2.
grasp
Then
the
it
idea when we
comes here again and checks the
make an
condition.
example. So
2
here
less than or
previously
equal 5, yes,
we
enter,
used
print,
to go through the
and
for
then
loop. So
increase.
if we
So
want to
now it's
write
3. 3
a number
smaller,
to write a program that
or equal
prints
5,
us
yes,
number
enter,
1 to
increase,
5,
it will
we
be
had
4.
to
And then again
write like
until it's 5.
4
When it's 5, it enters for
for
the last
loops,
time, and when we increase
something
the
like this.
value,
Let me
it
just
will
write it
become
down.
6, and 6 is not less than or
Int
equal
I
5. So
equals
therefore, it does
1,
not
I
enter this loop
equal
again, and the program
smaller
is
equals
finished.
5,
So this is
I
how
plus.
while loop would work.
Then we
And in
could
the
say, okay, print
next
I
sessions, we
and
are
L.
going to do some coding
So
exercises
this is how we used
using
to
while
print
loops.
number
So
1
it
to
would
5
be
previously.
easier for you to see it in
However,
different
if you want to
examples
do
and
the
start
same
making
thing
it
but
understood for
using while
yourself
loop
and start coding it yourself. we
Thanks
can
for watching.
break down these 3 parts of the for loop into different parts.
Hello
So
everyone,
first
welcome
we
back. Now we're going
initialize
to do some
the
coding
integer number
exercises using
named
while loop.
num.
We
as
would
to
like
be
to
1,
write a program
and
that
then we
works
start
like
the
a
while loop. So we start
calculator
the
to
while
adds
loop,
up
and
whatever
in the
we give it as
parentheses
an
we only
input,
write down one part of the
and
condition,
it's going
which is
to work
as long as num smaller
we are adding
equal 5.
a new
So the
numbers,
condition would
except
be something
if
like
we put
this.
0, it will stop.
So we repeat the while. For
As
example,
long
I would
as
like to add a
num
few
is
numbers
smaller,
and know
less than
the
or
sum of all
equal
of these
5.
numbers. Then
So
we
I keep
enter
the loop.
entering new
So we
numbers,
print out the
and
num,
if I
and
mention
here
as
we
if I put
are
0 as one of the
incrementing the
numbers,
value
the
of
program knows that
the
I would
value of
like
num
to finish
ourselves. So
the
previously we used to
input
put
numbers,
this part
and it
in the
returns me the
parentheses,
result.
but we are putting the
So for this
increment
program,
part
we need to write a while
inside the
loop. We
loop,
cannot write it
and
using
previously
for
we
loop
used
because
to initialize
we
the
don't know
integer
how
in the
many
parentheses,
numbers
and
the
we are
user would
initializing
like
it
to
before
give
the
us,
loop,
so that
then
we
we
can do
are
the calculation for him.
printing
So as long as the user is giving us any number
using this cout function,
we're
and
going
also
to
the
store
second
the
part
number,
of the parenthesis
and
for
when
the for
he
loops
or she
is exactly
gives us the
printed
number
here.
0,
So the reason
we consider
why
it as a
we
sign
need to use, for example,
that
while
he
loops
is
to
done with entering the
execute
numbers.
code,
So we do the final
is because
mathematical
a while loop in C++
addition for him or
is
her and return
can help us to
the
repeatedly
result.
execute a
So
block
let's
of
see
code,
how
like
it works.
similar
I
to
think
the for
when
loop.
we run
However, the
the
while loop is
code, we can
more
understand
straightforward and
often
easier.
is used
It's
when the
easier to
number of
understand. So
iteration is
we
not
initialize
known
one
beforehand.
number
So when
called
we don't know
number,
how many
another
iteration do we need,
we initialize
we simply
another integer
use a
called
while
sum.
loop, and we say as
We
long
set
as the
sum to
num
be 0,
less than
and
or
then
equal
we
5,
tell the
just do
user
this for us,
enter
and then
numbers
change
to
the
add
value of
and
num,
0
so we
to
can
stop.
increase
So
it or decrease
if
it
the
as we
person
want in this line.
enters 0,
However,
the
if we
program is
forget
going
to
be
write
stopped.
this part,
However,
it will
any
become
other
like
number to be
an infinite
entered
loop,
by the
because
user
it is
means that the
printing,
user
for
would like
example,
to
num equals
add
1,
this
it enters the loop.
So the
It
number
prints
is
1,
read
and
from
then
the
it prints
user
1, and then it prints
using
1 forever until we
function.
stop the program, because
So we
1
write
is
a
not being
while
increased.
loop
So
here.
when we increase
So the while loop would be like this. The
value
condition is like as
by
long
1
as
here,
then
the
the
next time that it
number
enters
is
the
not
the loop,
equal
it's 2,
0,
then
so
it's 3,
continue
etc. So
until
let me
user
just
enters 0.
as long as
Run
the
the program
user
and see
is
how it
not
works.
entering 0, enter this loop. We enter the loop. We assign the number to sum. So store it in the sum. So here, and then we ask again num equals 1 from the user to give
when
us
we want to
the
go
new
through
number.
the condition of the
The
while loop,
person
we
would
say,
like
okay,
to add up
num
to the
equals
previous
1.
number.
Num
So let's
is try
less than
once.
or equal
It's
5.
easier to grasp the
It
idea.
passed the conditions. It enters the loop.
So
it
I
prints
mentioned
1. Then it increased the value of num by 1.
I say 1,
So num
I
would
enter,
be 2. Then
nothing
it
happens.
comes here
2,
again and checks
I
the
enter,
condition.
nothing happens.
2
I say
less than
another
or equal
2,
5. Yes,
nothing
enter.
happens.
Print,
Now I put 0
and then increase.
So now it's 3.
Now it's
3
done. When I put
smaller,
0, it gives me the final sum.
or equal 5.
So
Yes,
1
enter,
plus 2
increase,
plus
it
2
will be
would
4.
be 5.
And then again until
when
it's
I
5.
put
When it's
0,
5, it enters
the
for the
program
last time,
is
and when we increase
finished,
the value,
because
it will become
here
6.
we are
And 6
mentioning that is not less than or equal 5. So therefore, it does not enter this loop again.
So
and
when
the
I put
program
0,
is
it
so
cannot
this is
pass
how
this condition,
and
while
it simply
loop would
prints
work,
out the
and
sum. In the
how
next sessions, we are going to
let
do
me
some coding
remind
exercises
you of
using
this. So we
while
learned
loops.
that
So it would be easier
this
for you to see it in
line
different examples and
would
start
be, so
making
what
it
we have
understood for
in
yourself and start
line
coding it yourself.
Thanks for watching.
181 here equals this line. So instead
Hello
of
everyone,
writing
welcome
this,
back.
they
Now
wrote
we're
this.
going to do
So
some
let
coding
me
exercises
just
using while loop.
show you
We would like
how
to
the
write a program that works like a calculator
worked
to adds up
in
whatever
my
we give it as an
example.
input. And
So
it's
initially,
going to
I
work
mentioned
as long
the
as
number to
we are
be
adding
1,
a new
2, 2.
numbers,
Okay.
except if we
So
put 0,
initially,
it
I
will
said
stop. So,
number equals 1.
for example, I would like to add a
Then
few
I
numbers and
mentioned
know
number
the
equals
sum of
2.
all of these numbers.
Then I
So I
mentioned
keep
number
entering new
equals 2
numbers,
again.
and if I mention
it starts
as,
with
if
this.
I put
So
0
the
as
sum
one of the numbers, the program
is
knows
0.
that I
It
would
says
like
sum
to finish
equals
the
0 plus 1.
input numbers, and it returns me
Then
the result. So
sum equals
for this program,
1
we need
plus
to
2.
write a while loop.
Why?
We cannot write it
Because
using a for
so
loop,
initially the sum
we
equals
don't
0
know
because
how
we
many
initialize it to
numbers
be
the
0.
user would like
And we
to give
enter
us,
the number
so
to
that
be
we
1
can
in
do
the
the
first
calculation
round,
for him.
and 1
So
plus 0
as long
is
as
1.
the
So
user
1
is
assigned
giving
to
us
sum.
any number,
So then it
we're
goes
going
for the
to
next
store
round.
the number.
And when
for this
he
equation,
or
sum
she
equals
gives us the number
1
0
from the
we
previous
consider it as a
iteration.
sign
So the value of sum is 1
that he is
here.
done with
Plus
entering the
number.
number.
So we do the final
the
mathematical
second input, I put
addition
2
for him or her, and
then
return
the value would
the
be
person
3.
the result. So let's see how it works. I think
And then
when we run
the
the
equation
code,
would
we can
be 3
understand it a
because
bit
3 was the final value of sum from previous iteration. We initialize one number and in the new iteration, so the sum is 3. We initialize another integer called another 2. We set sum to be 0. It's exactly and then we tell the user enter numbers to add. And so 0 1 to stop. 2 2 and then when if the person 0 enters 0 the program is going to be stopped once. However, any other number to be entered by the user means that the user would like to so it's basically working like so the number is read from the user 15, using C18 function 20. So we write a while loop 0 here. So the while loop would be like this. The condition so is like 20 as long as 15 the number 35 is not equal 0. So continue 54. Until so user enters 0. As long as the user is not entering 0, enter this button. We enter the loop. We and this is actually one of the number usefulness of while loop. So we don't know how many and then we ask again can give us from the so user customized. So one user can new number use that for 2 times. The person would like to add up to the previous number 10 times. So let's try it one and when they are done, it's easier to grasp the idea. Of course, we could do it using for loops as well. Using for loops, there were some numbers to ideas. I say one. Say that okay. We are going to I say 2 I ask you a bunch of numbers that you another would like to add. Please first tell us how many numbers you want to add. So now it's done. When I put 0, it gives me the final sum. We could do in a for loop as well. 1 plus 2 plus 2 would be 5. And when I put 0, the program is thanks finished. For watching. Don't forget to exercise. Here we are mentioning that enter this while as long as number does not equal. So today we are going to discuss. So when I put 0, it cannot pass this condition. Do while. And it simply so it is very similar to while loops, but there are certain differences. Printing the sum. So do while remind you of this. So we learned similar. To a while loop, but with this one crucial difference. A do-while loop will execute the block of code at least once, even if the condition is false. On the first equals check. So this is because the condition is checked so after the code this, they wrote has run so and not before. So the main advantage of a do-while loop is that it ensures the code block runs at least once, no matter initially what. So I this can be useful the number when we want to ensure the user interacts with so your program. I said, or when you need a certain action to take place at least once before checking a condition. Equals 2. So it's often used in programs that require user input because so you typically want to prompt the user at least once before deciding if you need to loop again or not. 0 so this is basically 1. How it works, and generally then we start the structure would be we say do plus 2 in the brackets we execute the code initially and the sum while and 0 because we initialize it to be 0. So let's and we enter the number to be 1 in the first so we initialize round, one integer 1 plus 0 number is 1. So 1 is then assigned we to say sum. Do so we then open the bracket. It goes for the next enter round. A positive so number. As we for store the positive number that the user enters, and we check from the previous iteration the number of sum is 1 is here lower plus number or equal so as 0. As the we say that's not a positive number. 2. Please try again. Then the value and then it comes 3. Here. So the condition is that and if the number, the equation would be lower 3 because equal 3 was the 0. Final value lower than or equal 0. So it repeats the new iteration the so the sum the user gives 3 a positive number. So plus I mentioned to say it in an easy way, it would so be like this. It asks me to give a positive number. So if I enter a positive number, this the loop will finish so 1 and then 2, it 2 prints and then out this put 0 line saying that thank you you entered and exit the program. Let's and print whatever we entered. Or if I give it a negative number
it enters
So
this
it's
if
basically
condition. For
working
example,
like
I would
a
say -2.
calculator. If I
So
say
if I say
1,
-2, it is
50,
for sure
18,
lower than 0. It says, okay,
20,
that's not a
and
positive
then
number, try again.
0,
And
it
while the
computes
number
everything
is
for us. So
-2,
20 plus
go
15
back to
will
this
be
part again,
35
enter a
plus
positive
18 and
number, and
1
then
will
we
be
store the
54.
number,
So this is
and then
how
it sees if it's
our
positive or
calculator
negative.
is
It
working
is if
here.
it
When
is
we
negative,
smash
it
the
repeats
0
everything
button,
again. So let's
it
try and see
exit
how
the
it works.
program. And this is actually one of the
So
usefulness
enter a
of while
positive
loop. So
number.
we
I would
don't
say
know how
-20.
many input the
That's not a
user
positive number.
can
Please
give
try
us.
again.
So it is
So
customized. So one user
-25.
can use it for 2
Enter
times. One
again. It
user
says
can
that's not
put
a
it
positive
for
number. Please try
10
again and
times,
enter a
whatever
positive
they
number.
want. And when they're
-30.
done, they
It
can
will
put 0.
not
Of course, we
finish
could
as
do it
long
using
as
for
I'm
loops
giving
as well. Using for loops, there were some
negative number. And when I say
ideas
like
to
20,
say
it
that,
says thank
okay,
you, you entered
we are
20.
going to. So this is how
Ask you
generally
a
bunch of
do-while
numbers that you would
situation,
like
a
to add.
do-while loop
Please
would
first
work.
tell us how many
So I
numbers you
entered
want
20.
to
It
add.
stored. I firstly entered
Initially be a
-20. It
priori.
stored
So that we
-20.
could do in a for
-20 is
loop as well,
lower
but
than
it's
0.
much
Yes.
easier
So it
to
prints
do it
this value
using
and it says,
while loop. So this
okay,
is actually
while
why while loop
-20
is
is
there.
lower than 0,
Thanks for watching.
go
Don't
back to
forget
the
to
do.
exercise
So it
these coding
starts from here again.
exercises
Enter
yourself.
a positive number. And we entered -25
So
here.
today we are going to
It says
discuss
-25, lower than
another
0. Okay, it
way to
showed
write
this
loops.
message
It
and
is
saying that,
do
okay,
while.
25 is
So it is
lower
very
than
similar
0,
to while
go back
loops,
to the
but
top.
there
So
are
it
certain
goes
differences.
back and
So
to
a
the
do
top
while
again and again and
loop
again
in C++
until I enter a
is
positive
similar,
number,
which is the case
to a while
here.
loop, but with
And then
one
it
crucial
says,
difference.
thank you,
A
you entered
do-while
20.
loop
So
will
this is basically
execute the
how
block
a
of
do-while
code
loop
at
would work.
least once, even if the condition is
it is
false,
being
on the
executed
first check.
first,
So this is
as we
because the
mentioned.
condition is checked after
Then
the code
the condition will check
has run
will
and
be
not
checked
before.
to see if
So the main
another
advantage of a
execution of code
do-while
is
loop is
required
that it or not. So if
ensures
I was going
the
to
code block runs at least once,
oops.
no matter what. So
Sorry,
this can
what
be
did I do?
useful.
Yeah. So if I
When we
was
want
going
to ensure the
you know,
user
enter
interacts
like
with
your
a positive
program,
number in the
or when
initial
you need a certain
iteration,
action to take
like
place at
if
least
I
once
say
before checking a condition.
enter a positive
So
number, and if I say
it's often
11,
used in
it
programs
says
that
thank you, you
require
entered
user
11. So
input
I
because
say
you
enter a
typically
positive
want to
number.
prompt the
It
user
says
at least once
okay,
before
the number
deciding
is
if
11.
you
Number is 11 is
need
not lower than
to loop
0.
again
Then
or
it
not.
escapes.
So this is
It's
basically
not lower
how
than
it
0
works.
again. It
And
escapes.
generally,
So
the loop is not going to be
we
executed
start
anymore.
the structure
And it
would
says,
be
we
thank you,
say
you
do
entered like 11.
in the brackets.
So it is
we
one time
execute the code
executed,
and we say
and then the
while,
condition
and then we
is
put the
checked
condition
here.
So
So this
let's
is the main difference.
see an example here.
So we initialize one integer called
Hello and
number,
welcome back.
and then
Today we are
say
going to give you a coding
we
exercise.
open the bracket
Using
we say
do
enter
while
a
loop. So you
positive
see
number.
how
We
practical
store
this
the
do while
positive
loop
number
is.
that the user
So we are
enters,
going to write
and
a
we check.
program
So if
that checks
the number
to see if
you're
is
entering your password
lower
correctly
or
or not.
equal
As long as you're
zero,
not entering
we
your
say
password
that's not a
correctly,
positive
it is
number.
going to ask
Please
you
try
enter
again
the password
again and
and
again,
then
and
until
comes
it
here.
is correct.
So
the condition
when you
is
enter the
that
correct
if the number
password
is it finishes the
lower
program or equal.
So
Then
initially
zero.
we
Lower than or
initialize
equal
two
zero.
strings,
So it
one password
repeats
and one
until the
corrected
time
password.
the
So
user gives a
imagine that
positive
the
number.
correct
So
password is
to say it
ABC.
in an
Something
easy
very
way,
easy.
it would be like this. It
And
asks
we
me
start
to
our loop
give
here.
a
Do,
positive
so
number.
it
So
enters
if
the
I
loop
enter
without
a
checking
positive
any
number,
conditions.
it says
The
enter
loop
the
will
password,
finish,
and you
and
enter
then
your
it
password.
prints out
It
this
says
line
if saying that thank you.
So
you
if the
entered, and
password is
enter
correct,
and
it does
print
not
whatever
enter
we
this
entered.
condition. Or if
Because
I
its
give it
condition
a
says that
negative
password
number,
does not equal the
it
correct
enters
password.
this
So
if condition.
if
For example,
the
I would say
entered password,
-2. So
the
if I
one
say
that you
-2,
enter
it is
not
for
equal
sure
to the
lower than
correct
0. It
password
says,
that
okay,
is
that's not a positive
ABC.
number,
It
try
says
again.
enter
And
incorrect
while the
password, try
number
again.
is
And it says as
-2,
long as the entered password
go
does
back
not
to this
equal
part
the
again.
correct
Enter
password,
a positive
ask
number. And
this
then we
again from the
store
user.
the number
And if
then it
by chance you mention that okay,
positive
enter
or
the
negative,
password, and you enter
if
the
it is
password,
negative,
and the password
it repeats
equals
everything again. So
correct
let's try and
password.
see how it works.
It does not print, it does not enter this if.
So
it
enter
escapes,
positive number.
and
I would say
here
minus 20.
the condition does not
That's
pass
not a
because
positive number. Please
the
try
password
again. So
equals the
minus
correct
25.
password, so it does not have to go
Enter
another time
again.
in the
It
loop.
says that's
and
not
it
a
says
positive
access
number.
granted.
Please try again.
So
and
let's
enter
try
a
and
positive
see.
number. Minus 30. It will not
So if I
finish
say
as
ABC,
long as I'm
it
giving
says
a
access granted.
negative
So
number. And when I say
here
like
is
20,
my
it
password.
says
Here
thank
is
you.
the
You entered
correct
20.
password.
ABC.
So this is
enter
how
the password. I
generally
say
a do
ABC.
while
So
situation,
ABC,
do while loop
it says
would
that
work.
so I
Password does not
entered
equal
20.
correct
It
password.
stored. I
But this
firstly
is not our
entered minus
case because
20. It
this
stored
the
minus
entered
20.
password
Minus
and the
20 is
correct
lower
password
than
are the
0.
same. So
Yes.
it escapes
So it
this
prints
loop.
this value and
Then
it
it
says,
checks.
okay,
You see,
while
as
minus
long as
20
password
is
does not
lower
equal
than
the
0,
correct
go
password.
back
So
to
this
the
is
do.
not also
So it
our case
starts from
because
here
they
again.
are
Enter
equal.
a positive
Therefore,
number.
it finishes the
And
loop
we entered
and it
minus
gives us the
25
access.
here.
However,
It says minus 25 lower than 0.
let's
Okay,
try
it showed
once more,
this
and it
message and
says
saying
like
that okay,
enter the
25 is
password. I would
lower
say
than
something
0.
like it says
Go back to the top. So
incorrect
it goes
password. Try
back
again.
and
I would say
to the top
anything.
again and
Try
again and
again.
again until I
Try
enter
again.
a positive number.
And
Which
whatever
is the
you
case
enter,
here.
it says try again.
And then it
in
says
the end, I
thank you. You
mentioned the
entered
correct
20.
password.
So this
and
is
it says,
basically
okay,
how a
granted.
do while loop
So
would
you see,
work.
this is very useful example, and
it is being
this is a very
executed
practical example.
first,
in real world,
as
we
we
have some
mentioned.
access like that in the world
Then
when we want
the
to check
condition
something
will
like
check.
emails, etc. Of course,
Will
there
be checked
is a
to
limit
see
until
if another
like you
execution
can
of
repeat
code
it for
is
2 times, 3
required
times after
or not.
that. So if I
your
was
account
going
will
to
be
blocked for security reasons, however, we can use the sorry, what
do
did I do?
while.
Yeah. So if I was
To do
going
that.
to,
So
here
it says
enter
like
the password,
I say
positive number in the
QWE. It says they are not
iteration.
equal. Therefore,
Like
it enters this
if I
and
say
prints incorrect password.
enter a positive number,
And because
if I
they are
say
not
11,
equal, like the
it says
entered
thank you. You
password and the
entered
correct password
11.
are not
So
equal.
I
It
say
goes to
enter
the
a positive
loop once
number.
more.
It
says
says
enter the
okay,
password.
the number is
and
11.
stores,
Number
and I
is
said
11 is not lower than 0.
they
Then
are
it
not
escapes.
equal. It says
It's not
incorrect
lower than
password.
0
Try
again. It
again.
escapes.
So
So
it is what
the
it is
loop is not
printed
going to
here.
be executed
And then
anymore.
because they are
And
not
it says
equal,
thank you.
it
You
goes
entered
again
like
to the
11.
loop. So this
it is
continues until
one time
I give the
executed,
correct
and
password
then the condition is
in the
checked
end.
here.
And it
So
says
this is the main
access
difference.
granted. Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's lesson, we are going to talk about nested loop. So a nested loop is simply a loop inside another loop. This means that you have one loop running within the body of another loop. So the outer loop runs a specific number of times, and for each iteration of the outer loop, the inner loop runs completely. So imagine a clock. So the hour hand is like the outer loop, and the minute hand is like the inner loop. So for every movement of the hour hands, which is the outer loop, the minute hand inner loop completes a full cycle. So another way to visualize this is to think about a grid of rows and columns. So the outer loop iterates through the rows, and the inner loop iterates through the columns. So in order to make it more clear, let's come up with an example. So here, just imagine that we would like to write a program that generates a 5 to 5 multiplication table. So we have rows and columns here, and we want to see this in the output. How to see this in the output? Previously, we learned about how to do for loop, but when we were doing for loop, it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, and that's it, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it was not like a full table. So I would like to write a program that generates a 5 to 5 multiplication table and shows something like this. To do that, the outer loop is defined like int I equals 1, I smaller than or equal 5, and I plus plus, and then we enter the loop here. And then we have the the inner loop, we have the int j equals 1,
j lower than or equal 5 and j plus plus, and then we see out I times j. So let's run first the program. So exactly as we want it. So exactly as we want it. We have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. But how does it work? So let's analyze the code a bit so we can understand how it works. So here we enter the loop with I equals 1, then j equals 1. So when I equals 1 and j equals 1, I times j would be 1. Then still here we had the I equals 1, j equals 1. So and it's finished now. We did the calculation and we printed 1 here like this, and we also put it here. Then j is increased by 1 value while the I stays the same, because we didn't finish this loop first to go back and increment the value of I. So I stays the same and then j increases. So the first result was I times j equals 1. Okay, so now I still equals 1 while j equals 2. Now I times j equals 2. Another round. I still equals 1 and j increases until it reaches 5. I equals 1, j equals 3. Then we have I times j equals 3. And this continues until we have I equals 1 and j equals 5. Therefore, I times j equals 5. So when we reach this stage, it's the first line being printed. Yeah. So it means that this j started from 1 and reached to 5. Okay, so it reached to 5. Now it has to get out of this inner loop. When it gets out of this inner loop, we print out cout and l. So it is here now when the j loop finishes, and it goes to the next line here. And when it goes to the next line here, please note that it is in the first loop still. It goes up. So now the value of I increased from 1 to 2. So now we have I equals 2, j equals 1 again, and I times j equals 2 as to have here, as we have it like here. So, and then I stays 2 until j is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and when j reaches 5, it again finishes the inner loop and it goes to the next line using this AND-L function. It is here. It goes to the next line, which will be here. So now I is incremented from 2 to 3. So then it does the calculation again. So this is basically how inner loops would work, and it's a very nice way to make when we have two-dimensional arrays, lists, numbers, etc. We can use nested loops, and they are very convenient to work with, and they are very practical. So I would suggest you to practice this nested loop example as much as you can. So, and you start, if you forget what I told you about the analyzing this part, it would be nice to go back and review these analyses, and then start doing the coding yourself. And then when you forgot, you either can come back to this video or you can start doing the analyses yourself to understand the logic behind it. It would be very important, I guess. And then move on to the next coding exercises. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to do another coding exercise here. So we would like to write a program that prints a pattern of numbers in the form below. So this is the form that we would like to print. So in order to print something like this, we usually don't know it by heart. We need to think about it. So this is where the programs get a bit more complex than before, and we need to start thinking about how to get to the result that we want a priori to start just right away coding the program. So in order to print that, we can use a nested loop. To do that, we have one outer loop and one inner loop. So in order to have these two loops, we first start with the outer loop, that is I. We say, so let me first run the program so we see that we have the result, and then we analyze it. Okay, so here we have the result as we wanted. So but how did we get there? And with only 3 lines of code, so how did we get there? Let's analyze the code. So first we have the outer loop, which says integer I equals 1, I lower than or equal 5, I plus plus. Then, so this is not something very strange. This we have. This we already had in many examples. So here we also have this for int j equals 1. However, the upper bound of j is I. So j must be lower than or equal I, and then we increment its value one step at a time. And then we print the value j. When the first loop, the inner loop is finished, we go to next line, and then we go to the outer loop again. So how does it work? Let's see. Let's start writing the output here step by step. It would be easier to understand the logic. So first I equals 1, we enter the loop. J equals 1, and at the same time j must be lower than equal I. So and I is 1, so j must be lower equal 1. So only one iteration for j is allowed because it already starts from 1, and it must be lower than or equal to 1. So when it enters I equal 1, j equal 1, and the result would be 1. So it prints the value of 1 like this, because we are having cout j. Then it goes here, so the inner loop is finished. It goes here, it goes to the next line. This is where the first one is printed, and then it's go to the next line. Now I equals 2. I equals 2, j again equals 1 because it starts from 1 every time. And j must be lower than or equal to I, which will be something like this. So j will be lower than or equal to, because the value of I is 2 this time. So given this, we will first start with j1. So with j1, the inner loop is executed, so it prints 1. So the first result will be 1. And then it goes to the inner loop again. It increments the value of j, and j will become 2. 2 is still lower than or equal to as the condition here. So it enters the loop again and prints the value 2. So it prints 2. When it prints 2, it reached its maximum level. So it reached its upper bound, which is equal to I. So I is 2 and it reached 2, so it's finished. So the inner loop is finished. It prints, it does one endl, so it goes to the next line here and starts from here. So now it goes to the first outer loop. So now I equals 3 and j starts from 1 again, and as j has to be lower than or equal to I, it means that j must be lower than or equal to 3. So j starts from 1, 1 enters the inner loop, and we print 1. Then we increment the value of j. J is 2 now. 2 is lower than or equal to 3. So yes, it comes here again and prints the value 2. And another time, j is increased, and then now the value of j is 3. 3 is passing this condition, so 3 lower than or equal to 3, yes, so it comes here again and prints the value of j. So now that j is 3, it reached like this, like it's like writing 3 lower than equal to 3. So it does not, it's not able to go another round, because if it goes for j equals 4, it does not pass this condition here. So because of that, the inner loop is finished. It goes to the next line using this part of the code. So, and it goes to this part. So as you see here, this one here, we reached here. Then we have this one, which is here. Then we have 1, 2, 3, which is here. And then next time when the inner loop is done, it comes here, it goes to the next line. We were here, it goes to the next line. So now we are here with this line, and then it has the outer loop, so it goes back up again. So I was 3, we increase the value of 3, it will be 4 now. 4 is lower than or equal than 5, yes, pass the condition, enters here. So enters the inner loop. So I equals 4, j equals 1. So j must be lower than or equal to I, because in the second part of the for loop, this condition applies. And then it means that because I equals 4, it means that j must be lower than or equal to 4. To do that, j equals 1 starts the loop while I is 4. So it's like writing 4 here for this time, for this round of iteration only. So j equals 1, it prints 1, and then it comes back to this line. Okay, it increased the value of j and then prints 2, then comes back to this line, increase the value of j, print 3, and then 4. When it reaches 4, it means that j is equal to its upper bound, then it cannot continue. So that it cannot continue, it finishes the inner loop, and by having this line, we are now here. After this line, it goes to the next line, and then we have the outer loop. So the outer loop is still I, which is 4. Now we increase the value of I from 4 to 5, which is the last time, because I also must be lower than or equal to 5. So this is the last round that we entered. So we enter with I value 5, I equals 5, while j equals 1. And it starts from the j equals 1 again. So j has to be lower than or equal to I, means that j has to be lower than or equal to 5. So it enters with j equals 1. So it prints 1 one time and then increase the value of j, come back here, it prints the value 2, 3, 4, and finally 5, and it cannot go beyond 5 because when j is 5, it is reaching its maximum level, which is 5, and then it goes to the next line. So from there we go to the next line, but we do not go back to the outer loop anymore, because also when the value of I is 5, we increase it to 6, it does not pass this condition, so it cannot enter the loop again. So this is how this nested loop would work. So let's run one more time. Yes, so you see how this nested loop has worked, and how we got to the printed form and pattern of the numbers that we were looking for here. It is very important to start practicing these things yourself, because it's little by little it is getting a bit more complex. So in order to make sure that you are improving your coding skills as you're proceeding through the course, please try these practices yourself several times. This is very important. Thank you for watching.
Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about functions. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about functions. So a function is like a mini program within your main program. So it is a reusable block of code that performs a specific task. Instead of writing the same code repeatedly, we can put that code in a function and just call it whenever we need it. So we write the function once, and we can use it multiple times. So it saves the time and effort. So if you have a program that calculates, for example, the sum of two numbers in multiple places of your code, using a function avoids writing the same code again and again. So the program will become easier to understand and to maintain, of course. And functions break down, the complex tasks into smaller, manageable pieces. So for example, here, if you remember previously, we were talking about like printing one thing here, like saying uh, the sum is, and then the number and L. So let me just initialize two numbers, saying that int a equals 10 and int b equals 12, for example. And we are saying that the sum is a plus b, okay? So using these three lines, we can have the sum of a and b. However, just imagine that we have like 1000 lines, and this code continues like for many times, and we have different blocks of codes here. Just imagine here we have a lot of codes and different tasks to be performed, and at some point again we would like to add two other numbers, like we would like to write down int c equals, for example, 15, and int d equals 20, for example. And then we see out the sum of c and d is c plus d and L. So you see, we are repeating this calculation again, and we had it one time here, and then we are repeating it here, and we may need to repeat it several times. So instead of writing these many codes repeatedly, we can simply just define a function to do the job for us. In order to define a function, we need to first declare it a priori to our main function. So this is our main function. So any C++ program will have a main function. Everything is within that main function. So before this main function, we can declare our additional functions that we would like to have. For example, here we declare a function called add, and it has two values as input values, int a and int b. So within the parentheses, it shows how many input it can take and what are the types of the input that it can take. So the first type is int a, so the first type is int and the second type is int. So the input of the function called add are two integers, and here this int shows the output of this function. So basically we learned 3 points here. So this is the name of the function, and within the parentheses we learn how many inputs the function has and what are the types of the inputs. In this case, they are both integers. It could be one integer, one float, it could be anything. And the third point that we learned here is that the output of this function, the resulting of this function would be also an integer. So we declare the function right here. So we are just saying the name, the output, and the inputs, and a semicolon, okay? Then when we come here in the main function, we call the function like this. So if we call the function, now within this int main function, we can call add. Why? Because initially, a priori to this main function, we have defined the function, okay? So we must define it before the int main. So when we call it within the int main, so it recognizes it and it does not return an error. However, this function is just declared here. In order to know what this function do, now I close the int main function. We go through the details of the function here. So basically, it would be something like this. We declare the function, we use the function. However, after the int main function is finished, we write down the details of the functionality of that function. So in order to do that, to see what this function is doing, we come to the end of the code. We exactly write what we wrote already for its declaration. Instead, we don't have a semicolon in the end, and we have two brackets within which we define the function. So every function has inputs and outputs. Here, in our case, we have two inputs that are integers. And the output would be the value of a plus b. So this could be a plus b, or it could be like c plus d, whatever the input of the function is, it can add it. So basically we are saying if the input is a and b, so you return those gathered inputs. So this will return the value of this function. So we write down return and we do the addition here. So this is how this function would work, and we go up to the main function. So I summarize it one more time before I go into more details. We declare the function before the int main function. We define the function after the int main function and say what it is going to do. And it must have one return value. So it usually has either a return value or it's a void function. So void function, we will talk about it in a few seconds or in a few minutes.
But in this case, because it's not a void, if it was void here, instead of int, we had void. So it's not a void function. It's a normal function that returns an integer value. To return this integer value, we write down return and we do whatever we want to do here. So and then we want to use this function in the main function, in the main block of code. So we define one int result and its value is this. So this is how we call the function. If you remember, the function name was add. So it's going to call the function named add with two values, 5 and 3. And when it is going to call this function with 5 and 3, it's like saying that, okay, one input is 5, the other input is 3. So it's going to add 5 to 3 and it is returning its result, which is 8. So 8 is returned and assigned to the result. And now we are printing the value of result. Let me just compile it once. Okay, so now we see that the sum is 8. As we discussed, here we call the function with two inputs. So if we are saying the inputs are integer, they must be integer here as well. It's not like that we can declare them as integer and we can put like 5.2 and 3. It returns error. So they must be integer. So then 5 and 2 are called using add function, and 5 plus 2 plus 3, sorry, it will be 8, and 8 will be returned here as the number assigned to the result. So instead of, for example, adding the different integers and different parameters throughout the code again and again and again, so we don't need to write it anymore. We just, whenever we want to use it, we just call the function. So let me just do another thing. I would say int result 2 equals add, like we can say 10 and 2, for example. It's not possible to write 10 and 2.2. There will be a problem if we run the program. So, and then I see out the second sum is, and I print the value result 2 and del. So let me just compile this. Yeah. So here we see we didn't have to do the calculation anymore. We just call the function once more with new values. So you can call the function millions of times, and with new values you can do the calculation. However, the function is written only one time. So it is more efficient to have functions that do the job for you, so you don't have to call them one by one. So this is very important to keep in mind to use the functions. And another thing that we could do here is like the following. So as you see here, we are printing the sum is in the main block. In order to be super efficient, we can also mention that in this function we define a new integer called c that is equal to a plus b, and then we see out the sum is, and we print c every time. So here what we can do is like this. So let me just clear this part, and this and this.
Let me see if I have errors or not. Okay, great. So you see, even now the code is even more clear. So here we are only saying add 5 and 3, add 10 and 2. So this is going to add any two numbers that are called using the add name because the name of our function is like this. And this function now it is actually not returning anything. So we can change the function to void. So what is void? Void we change the function output, we put it void. And we forget about this. Let me just first run to see. Okay, great. So here, previously, we were doing the calculation directly. We were saying return A plus B. However, then we decided, and then the return value was being assigned to the result here. However, then we decided to not to assign these function values to any integer, and we do all the calculation in the function. So the code, the main block will be, more clear. Therefore, we do the calculation here and we print everything here. So we are not printing anything here. So a void function is a function that is going to return no value. It's only doing some calculation. So now I change the integer output to a void value, to a void function, because it's not returning any value. It is simply just doing some calculation and printing something. If it is going to return something, it has to have some output data type like integer, float, double, etc. However, if it's not specifically returning something like this, like a plus b, for example, if it does not have something like this, it's a void function that is doing some calculation for us. So this was a brief introduction of the functions. In next lectures, we are going to do some coding exercises. Thanks for watching. Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to do some coding exercises. So we would like to write a program that writes a function that greets everyone who is running the program. To do that, we could simply write down cout and write the message that we would like to have, like welcome here, and del. However, in the main function that we have in C++, we don't want to write anything like that, and we would like to only have codes that are calling the functions and tasks are done in the functions. Therefore, the code is more clean, more readable, and more understanding. So to do that, we define one void function here. So the name of the function is greet. It has no input. So let's see how it works. Before starting the int main, we learned that before that we need to declare the function, and we have the option of defining the function either after the int main or even before the int main. So in this case, I am declaring and defining a function, both of them, both tasks before the int main. So I will learn three things about functions. So this will be, the name is just something that is behind the parenthesis, just before the parenthesis. So the name is greet. Whatever that is in the parentheses is the input of the function, and whatever is just before the name is the output. So as the input, it has no input, so we don't need to put any input when we want to call it. So it's not like add function like addition. So we give two numbers, so it will do some mathematical operations with those inputs. It's just a simple greeting function, so it needs no input. Whenever we call it like this, it's going to be performed, and the output is void. Why? Because it is returning no value. So as you can see here, we are not writing return something here. Okay, as we are not writing that, this function is a void function. Whenever a function is returning a certain output, it is not a void function. But here we are doing nothing. So let's compile. Okay, now we see that the function is working very well. So instead of writing cout welcome to C++ and do some additions, do other things in the main part, we're just calling the function greet. So the code is very clean, and everything is done behind the scene. So this makes you to have a very good understanding of how the code works chronologically. So when you have, for example, 10 functions, from the beginning, you start, for example, greet, you go and read the function greet, and you come back here. Okay, the first step was greet. And then the second function is here, third, fourth, etc. So whenever you want to see the details of each function, you go and read that function. And in the main menu, in the main function, everything is clear and only the functions are there. And all the details or the works, all of the coding details and all of the works are within each function, uh, making the code to be more understanding and clear for the reader to see, okay, there are 10 functions here. If I want to read about the greet function, I click on the greet. So I can simply and easily navigate the greet function. Otherwise, I have to, look for every line to see where we are greeting when we are greeting the customers, for example, etc. So this is another example for greeting. In the next session, we are going to do some more coding exercises. Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we are going to do another coding exercises. So we would like to write a function that does the multiplication of two double numbers. Previously, we learned how to multiply two numbers. However, using a function can help us to have a more efficient code. So we don't have to repeat a certain block of code repeatedly throughout our main function in order to perform a specific task for us. Using a function, we can define the function once and use it several times in the code, so it is more efficient. To do that, we learned before the int main function, if we want to have another function, there are two tasks that we need to take care of. So the first one is that we must declare the function before the int main function. So here we are declaring it. And also we need to define the function. But for definition of the function, we have the choice. Either we can define the function before the int main function, or we can do it afterwards. It's up to you. So in other exercises, I showed how we can only declare it above and define it after the int main function and use it in the main function. However, here I'm declaring and defining before the main function. And there are three things, if you remember, about a function that we understand from this line. So the first thing is its name, that is multiply. The second thing is within the parentheses, we learn how many input parameters it has and what are their data types. So here we learn there are two parameters as the input that this function requires to run.
and the data types are double, and both of the inputs are double. Finally, the third thing about the function, we learn the output of the function. So the output of this function would be a double as well. So this is its declaration, and within the bracket, we will have the definition of the function. So this function is going to return x times y. So these two inputs are being multiplied using this function, and we have the return. Why? Because the output is doubled. So if anything but void is the type of the output of the function, there should be a return here. But if the function is a void function, there must not be a return here. So having said that, let's come back here in the int main function. So we would like to call the function in our main function. So I declare a double called result, and I assign the value of it by calling the function. I call the multiply function, and within the parentheses, we learned that this function requires two inputs that are doubled. So these two double number are also considered as the input of this function, and the output of this function is going to be assigned to result. Finally, we are going to print the result to see the output. Let's run the program once. So we see the product is 9. So this function, the analyze of code, would be something like this. Here we are calling the function with these two values. When we call them, the program goes up here and it says, okay, multiply 4.5 and 2, and let's return the value of 4.5 times 2. So it returns the value, and the returned value is assigned to result. So this is how a function would work. So one exercise for you could be how to change this double function, the output of this function is double, to a void function. I would suggest pause the video now and think about it. And if you have already thought about it, now you may continue. In order to do that, we just replace double with void, and we forget about the return. We say int z equals, for example, y. And we simply just see out the value z here. Okay? Doing that, we don't even need this, and we don't even need this. So the code is even more efficient here. So it depends on what you want to do. But you see the code is very clear now. And let's see. Okay, so now everything works and the function has changed to a void function. So more blocks are here, so we added one line and we changed the code in this line. However, our int main function is very clean. So if we want to do multiplication several times, like here, sorry, like here, and then here we change the value, for example 7, 9, 10, something like this, and we say the output of multiply function is, okay. So instead of doing the calculation 4 times, I'm only calling the function 4 times. Let's see. Okay, so here we see that it is printing the output for us. So now every time that we call the multiply, it gets these two values in the parentheses, and then do the multiplication here and print it. So the first time when it's 4.5 and 2, it says, okay, 4.5 times 2, it will be assigned to z, which is 9, and then we print the 9. So this code is done. This line is executed. Then we have 7.5 and 5. It goes back up again. It says, okay, 7.5 times 5 will be assigned to z, which will be 37, and we're printing the 37. And it continues until the end. So you see how efficient it would be to write only a function that does the job for us instead of just repeating all of these blocks of codes again and again. So please don't forget to do the exercises yourself to get used to the syntaxes of how a function should be written and how a function would work.